All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Welcome to the September State Board of Education meeting.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
All right, before we get to the rest of the meeting, I'd just like to recognize we have a staffer here who's been here, I think pretty much every meeting since I've been Board of Ed Chair, but she's now sitting beside me instead of back there. Caitlin Davis, our new commissioner, welcome. We're looking forward to the iron rule of the Davis regime as we go forward. So, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be here and for all the good things we get to do together.
Yeah, me too. It's gonna be great. And if you haven't noticed, if some of you have come to State Board of Education meetings before, you might notice there's already a visible change. We have somebody at the front desk monitoring the door to the building to let you in. So, already rolling the changes here.
That was priority number one.
All right, so we have public comment. I know we have the scares. Do we have a stamp sheet? Anybody else? Sign
Watch
up.
out for the cords.
Just that, okay. So Stephen, do you want to go solo or do you guys want to go together? Okay. So 3 minutes and welcome.
Good morning, Chairman. I'm Stephen Scare of Nashua. I'm certified in general special education and specific learning disabilities. I have 35 years of experience working with children and adults with special needs, ranging in age from second grade to 32. There's a crisis in special education. Due to a shortage of certified special education teachers, districts are often forced to hire teachers and tutors through private agencies at significant expense. To resolve this, the state and local districts need to improve work conditions for special education teachers and restructure standards for those to meet the needs of those who aren't academically gifted. Why are teachers choosing to work full-time for agencies instead of public schools? These agencies pay by the hour and promise teachers they will limit the number of hours, allowing them to care for themselves and their families. In addition to the demands of regular education teachers, special education teachers are expected to meet federal and state compliance requirements regarding IEP, service delivery, and evaluations. Often these expectations are unrealistic. And when a case manager fails to meet these deadlines, they put their district out of federal and state compliance, and they face disciplinary action from their schools and citations from the Department of Education. Many times I've seen special education teachers cry because they couldn't keep up with their workloads. These unrealistic expectations also encourage, if not necessitate, shortcuts. The shortage of special educators will continue unless the state and the school districts improve work conditions. And why are there so many special education students? The most important criterion for a student to qualify for special services is the need for specially designed instruction to access the regular education curriculum. If the regular education curriculum adequately addresses these needs, there'd be less demand for special education services. Instead, students who fall behind early on are given IEPs, and well-meaning teachers and administrators push them through a rigid curriculum based on unrealistic standards. As a result, students who can't add or subtract with regrouping or even conceptualize percents and fractions are sitting through lessons on quadratic equations. Why? In real life, most of us will never need to figure out when a train leaving Shelbyville at 45 miles an hour passes a train leaving Springfield at 60. But our students will need to understand contracts from predatory lenders. Moreover, a third of students, by definition, are below average academically, which doesn't mean many of them are very bright and useful in other regards. And they deserve to have an accessible and useful education without being identified as having a disability. Our special education system is broken, but with common sense, compassion, and a willingness to make radical changes, we can have a structure that better serves our students and teachers. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Share your insight. I especially appreciate the Simpsons reference. All right, thank you very much.
Stephen. Oh, I'd love to pick up this discussion a bit. I truly believe all kids are equally with equal potential, and the way you train them makes a big difference in their life. And this is a cause very close to my heart. I'd love to have a discussion later.
Thank you very much. I look forward to speaking with you.
And Beth's here.
Okay, members of the board, a program offered at Fairgrounds Middle School in Nashua in June of this year presented kids with information about sexual orientation and gender identity without notifying parents and allowing them to opt out. One of the handouts was the genderbread person, which teaches children that they have gendered souls or gender identities. If they don't align perfectly with regressive stereotypes, then they might be transgender. This can put children on a path of confusion and serious medical harm. More than a year ago, Governor Sununu signed a law that updated RSA 186-11 as follows. Section 9C of RSA 186-11 says requires school districts to adopt a policy allowing an exception to specific course material based on a parents or legal guardian's determination that the material is objectionable. Such policy shall include a provision requiring the parent or legal guardian to notify the school principal or designee in writing of the specific material to which they object, and a provision requiring an alternative agreed upon by the school district and the parent at the parent's expense sufficient to enable the child to meet state requirements for education in a particular subject area. The policy shall require the school district or classroom teacher to provide parents and legal guardians not less than 2 weeks advance notice of any curriculum course material used for construction or program of human sexuality, human sexual education, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. The New Hampshire Department of Education never issued a technical advisory. It's been more than a year. So the National School District and other school districts never updated their policies, and New Hampshire students continue to be exposed to inappropriate materials without parental knowledge or permission. Please use your authority and connections to make sure the Department of Education sends out a technical advisory to school districts as soon as possible so our students are protected from this dangerous ideology.
Thank you. All right, no one else has signed up for public comment. No. Got the spot.
Morning, Chairman Klein, members of the State Board, Commissioner Davis. It's an honor to be here for your first State Board meeting, sharing some of the good things that are happening out in our districts around the state of New Hampshire, in particular in the western part of the state where we are from. My name is Rob Millay. I'm the superintendent in SAU 29, which provides administrative services for 7 independent districts from Chesterfield, Harrisville, Keene, Marlboro, Marlow, Nelson, and Westmoreland. I know you're impressed. I did that alphabetically intentionally. We're going to share something that was a result of our work in creating a strategic plan. And part of that was to create a portrait of a graduate, but also a portrait of an educator. Many districts around the state also have portraits of professionals, but they have a portrait of a teacher. And we took a stance where we felt that everybody who works for us plays a role in the education of our students, not just the classroom teachers that deliver that direct content and instruction, but also our folks who are in the custodial services, our food services, the administrative assistants who greet the students every day, the hall monitors, et cetera, and so on. I'm pleased to have my team here, and I'm going to turn it over to them. But before I do, I'll introduce them. Immediately to my right is Sharon Dion. She is the principal at Chesterfield School. Next to her is Ben White, assistant superintendent. And on the end is Eugene Frost, who is the supervisor of custodial services. They were all instrumental on the task force that was called together to create the portrait of an educator. And with that, I'll kick it over to them and just sit here and enjoy the expertise of my team.
All right, thank you, Rob. That took about my first 2 slides, so that's great. We're really honored to be here, especially in your first meeting with your new commissioner. And we are excited to present the work that we spent about a year working on. And as Rob alluded to, this was a really complex task. And I'm gonna dive a little bit about the history. If you go to the next slide. Hold on. Takes a minute. I know, technology is always fun. Here we go. So up on the slide is our team that was involved in this work. And so, as Rob had mentioned, this was a group from every employee category in our entire SAU. There's about approximately 20 members, all the way from food service to maintenance to teacher to principal to even district leaders. And it was spanning across our 7 independent school districts. Next slide, please. This charge, you're probably wondering, well, why did we do this? We did this because it was asked of us across all of our 7 independent school districts during the creation of our strategic plan the year before last. The strategic plan that we created was challenging because we had to embody the viewpoints and the opinions of not only us as school staff, but our community members, our students, our staff across 7 different communities. And that took an entire year. And from there, we had an action item 2B2, which was to develop a portrait of an educator to support a shared understanding of what SAU 29 is aiming for in terms of high quality educators. We had a problem with this because when this was developed, we believe it was meant to be a teacher. So an educator was a teacher. But there's so many other employees that work in our SAU in any school district across the great state of New Hampshire. So we decided to define educator as every employee that actually works in our school systems, because they have an important role in the development of a child from preschool all the way up to grade 12, whether they're relational or teaching life lessons along the way. And so with that, that means that this portrait that is going to be introduced to you is one that not only is followed by teachers, but for the custodial staff, the food service staff, the support staff, the superintendent, it falls above him, and it falls above me as the assistant superintendent. And it's a way for us to all pull on the same rope for who we are actually serving, and that's students. Next slide. I'm gonna share the mic a little bit with Sharon Dion, principal at Chesterfield School, to be able to talk about the process that we went through to create this.
So I'd like to start by saying I was very honored to be asked, actually with my best friend, to help co-chair this committee. We started education both as teachers. She was a special ed teacher. I was an elementary ed teacher. So we kind of worked our way through the system as well. You can see by this timeline, we met and we actually really took some time to think about who we wanted to invite to this committee. We wanted people that really were exemplars in our organization because we wanted a voice at the table from everybody. So that was really our first step was making the selection of people. Unfortunately, due to weather, our first meeting was postponed. And then immediately following that, we got right to work. And the energy in the room was so refreshing. Everybody was committed. Everybody was there for the kids. And so we did a lot of brainstorming, and you'll see through the process, we were trying to identify some pillars we could stand on. We went through a lot of discussions, lots of adjectives and different phrases that might exemplar our field that we're in. I was especially appreciative to have cafeteria workers, custodial workers, because often some of the kids that are struggling in school are connecting with those people, and people forget that. So they really had a nice voice at the table. So anyway, we got down through, we narrowed it down to, I think it was 7, And then we determined 7 was still a little too much, so that we came down with these 4, and I do have a handout for you so that you can have one. The 4 pillars we ended up with will be on the next slide here. And we fell on these after surveying every employee in our SAU, and we had one of the best representations across the SAU. We work with a consulting firm who couldn't believe the amount of feedback that we got from educators and staff throughout the SAU. He says, typically you don't see the responses that your group got. So we knew we had the ear and the eyes of people within the staff. So our major pillars are these 4, integrity, engagement, connection, and teamwork. And we have a definition underneath those. I'd like to also say, you know, often we hear about the standards that educators are held to. This was really, really important for us. Our ethics statement is very important to educators, and often you don't hear that. So that is embedded within this. Again, I'll let you read that, but next slide, please. So the exciting part about this is, so where do we go from here? As some representatives on this committee said to me, I have never been on such an effective committee before. We set a very tight time frame with Dr. White. We said we are going to do this within a year. We kept to our word and we did it. And so our next task now is to empower each group to come up with a new evaluation system that is based on these pillars. We feel that educators' time is very important, and you heard that from somebody in the public session. We want our practice to be reflective. We want to make educators the strongest possible educators they can be to deliver the best education to all of our students. So as you can see up here, we are going to review all of our evaluation tools and redo them all. And my goal, of course, is to try and do that within a year. But we need to go to all the unions to get their support as well, and moving forward and hoping to make our evaluation system valuable to everybody that is involved in that.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Absolutely.
I really like that idea, and I want you to explore that a little more. When you say evaluation tools, can you just give us a little bit of what that means?
So I'll use teachers as an example.
Yeah.
Actually, we all fall under these. We currently are using the Danielson model. And we have an online program that we use. We have 3 mini observations and a formal observation that we do within a 3-year cycle, and educators will cycle through that. There's written components, reflective components, a portfolio piece where educators can put artifacts over the course of 3 years that they want to demonstrate their professionalism and how they impact children. But there are some repetitive things in that, and we don't want it to just be a checklist where they're checking off the box. I pride myself in all of my evaluations that I do, no matter who the staff member is. Recently, I met with a new staff member and he said, you know, I came from another school district. I never had this kind of professional reflection before. You're really pushing me outside of the box. And I said, that's my job.
Yeah.
And that's what we want. We really want everybody, right down to the custodial staff,
Right.
to be able to say to his employees, what do you need?
Well, another thing to add to that, and that's actually what is so innovative about this, is why we wanted to present it.
Yeah.
The portrait itself is unique, but the fact that we are going to align everyone under the same goal, all staff, it's not going to be exclusive to just teachers, is the real hard work that's going to happen this year. And I'm not sure there's a lot of districts in New Hampshire that have taken this approach. We're doing it boldly because we felt that we wanted to leverage every staff member's talents, and also let our students know that we're all here for you. This is, no matter the role, we're ultimately here to support you.
Yeah, and I really liked what you were saying about including the custodial staff, the lunch staff.
Everybody, yep.
Because you're so right that sometimes those kids that are falling through the cracks in the classroom will connect with those other folks at the school, and if you're not including them, you're gonna miss that really important part.
So I'll let you in on a little secret. In case you weren't aware, evaluations are high anxiety, very stressful components of what we do year after year after year. And we want to shift those conversations from it being a compliance process or a haha gotcha
Right.
moment to a, hey, here's some things that we can do better. You're doing great, but we want to do better. And I'm glad that you referenced the custodial staff. So I'd love to have Eugene, who is the supervisor of our custodial staff, weigh in, because he was an integral part of this process as well.
Yeah, it was just great to be part of the team. I feel like when we see these things happen through the districts, I've been in a couple different districts myself. It is more teachers, administrators, to involve us was great. It was great for our team. It was great for all of us. We really felt like no matter who you are, if you look at all of those groups, it applies to all of us. So it was great.
I'm so glad to hear that. You know, when you think of any business, like if you walk into a school, same thing as the analogy of maybe a hotel, right? So you walk into a hotel, you're gonna evaluate that, lots of different criteria. The first one is it physical environment? Is the physical environment look good? Same thing when a parent walks into a school building, right? If it's dirty, if the floors are dirty, you know, if it doesn't look like it's well maintained, that sends a subtle signal to the parents that you're not paying attention to the details, right? So including the custodial staff, lunch staff, like all the support staff is just so critical because you are one whole team. And if you don't approach it like that, you can leave a really important part out. So I like that a lot.
And I think along with that, we can't lose sight that, you know, we need electricians.
Yeah.
We need plumbers, we need these people,
Yeah.
we need nurses. And I think because our organization values every position so much, that encourages kids to explore other avenues besides just going to a four-year school.
Yeah, and you don't want your support staff, whether it's custodians or plumbers, like, you don't want them to feel like they're not valued, right? You want them, everybody's got to pull in the same direction, right? And so, good job, like, doing that. I think that's really, a really nice approach.
I have a thought on this. You know, every adult absolutely must be a role model for a child, you know, so they're gonna mimic and learn from the adults. There is a movement called the Student as Mentors program, where how do you train older students to have empathy and understanding and take on mentorship of younger kids? This not only just help them teach and, you know, younger ones, it also reduces bullying and all kinds of things. I teach in Japanese schools. I've spent 3 months this year teaching there. One thing I noticed, end of the day, last half an hour, every kid picks up brooms, goes, cleans bathrooms, sweeps the floor, and when they leave the school, it is, you know, kept absolutely clean. It's like each time I go there, they kind of come eyes mist up, you know, watching these kids. They all work together, older kids and younger kids, to clean up the school before they leave. And I know it is kind of hard to build any. I look at it, how do we bring these kind of disciplines into kids in schools here? But you know, these kind of things bring teamwork and such between different age groups.
So yeah, absolutely. We believe in that too, and that's alive and well. It happens a lot at the elementary level. So when we have preschoolers and kindergartners who come in, we do programs such as like Kinder Buddies. So you have the older students who are on their way out to the middle school mentoring the youngest. And they even have, they have a whole relationship that happens the whole year. Sometimes it even ends with like this ceremony of a rose, sending it to them to send them off. It's really nice, but that's at the elementary level. And then it looks different again at the middle school level.
But most of the bullying happens in the older age.
Yes, and it's important to instill these characteristics at the earliest level of intervention. And so we try to focus on that. However, that is one of our focuses going into this coming year. It was on the last slide where we're going to work to align this with our mentor program for teachers. But we're looking to expand that and try to see how can we mentor not just teachers, but everyone that is in our schools, especially opportunities for leadership for students. So I appreciate you mentioning that.
And it's a great conversation, and Ben did a really good job of covering that. I think one of the challenges is that you've got to make it part of what you would refer to as your DNA or your culture, right? It can't be an event. You can't just say, oh, we're going to have an older kid mentor and younger kid day.
Yeah.
It's got to be a process, and it's got to go over time. And I'm glad you shared those experiences in the schools that you're at. You familiar with the sport of rugby at all?
Yeah.
You know, do you ever hear of the New Zealand All Blacks? The greatest rugby team in the world for many, many years. Professionalized in all regards of that sport, #1 ranking in the world. And part of their culture and DNA is that after practice is over, they don't have a custodial team that comes and cleans their clubhouse. They do it, the captains do it, the star players do it, the new players do it. It is who they are. This is their environment. They want to take care of it, make it acceptable for when they come in the next day. So it's not an event, it's a process. Sharon,
culture, yeah.
Sharon, for example, she starts that process on the very first day of school when the 8th graders line up and they clap in all of the underclassmen into her school and all the way to the kindergartners. They line up and they welcome all of the other students who are in grade levels below them. And so it starts early and it continues throughout the year.
I think to piggyback that too, I think a lot of leaders in schools right now are looking how to improve the culture of their schools. At my school, we have what's called Chesterfield Pride, and each letter stands for positivity, respect, integrity, determination, and excellence. And we really ingrained that, like the Japanese culture, into our kids. We happen to have a new lead custodian in our building this year that we stole from Eugene at the end. And after the first week of school, he came to me and he said, "What did you do to your kids? They put their chairs up, they pick up the floor, and it's embedding that pride. And it's in their education, but the school is theirs, not mine."
Yeah, I just want to follow up on that rather than first kind of question, but, you know, I've talked to superintendents over the years. And there's some struggle with how to do that, right? And I think that, I think your concept there is really, really important, that the kids have to take ownership of the school themselves and to feel pride in that. And that is something that you have to actively do. They have to be taught that, right? Because otherwise, so we at Boy Scouts, this is what we do, right? I mean, I used to be involved in Scouts for a long time. Part of leadership is, you know, you, patrol leader, like you're in charge of your campsite and everybody else. And so the kids learn very quickly. Nobody's going to pick up after them, right? But this come around and make sure stuff was done right. So it's up to you. And there's no reason whatsoever that a school can implement the same kind of culture. We have charter schools that do that very successfully in instilling that when it comes to just the campus, but also bullying, how you treat other students, right? That respect that you show to other students. And I liken it to athletics, right? So on a sports team, coaches don't tolerate players bullying each other in the sports team. That would never be allowed, right? You don't, hopefully it wouldn't, it's not supposed to, right? And if you culturally expand that to the entire school, that, you know, to use my school district as an example, like we're all Bulldogs, right? So we're part of a pack, a family, however you want to explain it to them. You don't pick on, right, people in your own pack, your own family, like you should. It's hard, but it needs to be done. It just takes that leadership at that level and teaching them how to do that. So I'm really glad to hear that you guys are sort of trying to instill that culture.
And I want to say, I think Rob has instilled that in our culture as an SAU, because we have such a unique, we're all coming from 7 boards, you know, really different communities. Marlow only having 25 kids. So our high school was 1,600. You know, we do go through, you're maybe a Bulldog now, but you're going to end up being a Blackbird when you get to Keene High School.
Yeah.
And this is that we want us all to have the same message going all the way through the system. So when they end up at the top, they have that same belief.
Yeah, it's part of building community too, right? You know, to get these kids to take leadership and ownership of their school sort of spills over into the broader community as well.
And while I recognize that there are some charter schools that do that already, I would suggest that there are a lot of public schools that have that same culture as well. I see it every day in my area, so I know that exists, you know, not just in the charter schools, but also your traditional public schools as well. And I know our teams work really, really hard. Bullying is an interesting conversation that we could go on for hours.
Sure.
I want to assure you at the state board level and Commissioner Davis, none of our teachers are instructing kids on how to bully. These are behaviors that they are learning outside of our curriculum that we are addressing diligently, responsibly, and expediently. So we do not have an approved curriculum on how to be a bully. We don't teach it. we try to unpack that and address that, so.
The, just say something else, but hurt people is what I think of when I hear from the, so I love this approach. Thank you so much for coming and talking about the portrait of an educator. I'm not sure of the veracity of the story, but there's that old story about John F. Kennedy going to NASA and talking to a janitor and saying like, what are you doing here? He's like, put the man on the moon. That like, it feels very similar to that sort of like spirit, which I just absolutely love because it's schools are mission driven organizations and everyone is part of that mission. And I really want to say the tackling of evaluations and the sort of collaborative approach towards it that we're dabbling into my day job now, but like organizational culture it's not about balloons and birthdays. It lives in the systems that run an organization that turn into how you get things done around here. The fact that you're looking at performance and looking at like focus on growth as opposed to that evaluatory sort of feeling to it, like that is, let's say there's a lot of corporate environments that could like aren't there yet. And the fact that as a school that you're like driving that way is just, and that is innovative. It's amazing. And I really hope to see it succeed.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, and if I can just follow up on that one point. So I like this, you know, you've got your portrait here, just. So my first reaction was this, and I was interested to hear you talk about your assessments and how that's working into it, which kind of answers my question. But so when you're looking at this, you know, these are all pretty much inputs, and there's some output stuff, but so how do you connect the with the performance evaluation, you know, the outcomes portion of this to this?
Great question. That's actually the hard work that we got
Yeah.
this year. I'd say the easy work was actually putting this together. When you get to creating an evaluation system for each of these employee groups that all fall under this portrait, that's where it's going to be more of a challenge. So typically when you're creating an evaluation system, we'll take teachers, for example, you're looking at starting with the framework. We're actually not going to start with the framework. This is going to be what we start with. And then we're going to find a framework, an evidence-based framework that can fit into this so that it's more homegrown and feels more authentic to what our staff are all actually being asked to do on a daily basis.
That's a really interesting way to do it, to say, let's look at what we're actually doing on the ground, rather than just pull it off the shelf framework.
Yes.
Exactly what I was.
And we have that system now where it was a pull off the shelf. And what we find is it's actually challenging for teachers themselves to fall in a teacher framework because a lot of it doesn't actually make sense to preschool all the way to 12.
Right.
And so when you look at all of the evaluation systems, that is the same. It's just the need to be authentic and tailored to their role is important. Because if not, we're going to have staff that don't feel that they're a part of the school community. They're not going to know their role, and they're actually not going to feel invested in the final product of taking a preschool student all the way to grade 12.
So like if you, it's sort of like, we hear this all the time about, you know, the off-the-shelf test, right? If the test is not aligned with what you're actually learning in school, then the kids aren't gonna do well on the test, right? It's a similar sort of thing. You don't want to evaluate teachers on stuff that you're not actually expecting them to do, just because some academic somewhere, you know,
Yes.
created this thing. So,
True.
can you guys, I know this, you're just beginning that sort of part, but I'd be really interested in learning, you know, in a year or whenever you guys have found that magic of how to make that work, you know, feel free to come back and update us on what you did and how you think it works. And
I would even go further. I would say, so I love this model, but you only know if the model works only if you have data.
yeah,
Okay, so you can only manage what you measure. So once is, of course, you're going to have internal corrections for different things. And ideally, once we see the proof of how things change, we need to kind of codify it.
Mhm.
And as Drew said, how do you take it to other school systems? And say, now this is a codified model that we have tested out. Can you at least start to implement and start to see a much larger scale transformation?
Yeah, that's actually one of our goals is to make this more of an evolving system. So we want to take feedback on a regular yearly basis. And yeah, we would love the opportunity to come back with some initial data to be able to present and show what initial findings that we're seeing, if there's any themes, because ideally it would be great to show a small sample size that is actually succeeding, then you could transpose it to maybe happening in even larger, more.
And what is not working either.
Yeah.
We need more.
What is not working,
Yeah.
yes,
So
exactly.
you don't repeat that, the others don't repeat that, yeah.
Yeah, well, the fact that you're approaching it with that mentality of making adjustments every year, that's really important, because that way you'll figure out pretty quickly what works and what doesn't.
Yes, yes,
Yeah, thank you guys, this is really interesting.
thank you.
You guys are great.
Well,
Appreciate your time, thanks, Bob.
Here's to a great school year for all of us. So thank you for having us. It was a pleasure.
I'm just curious, you've given us also a portrait of a graduate, but
Oh.
we didn't go there. so-
Yeah, sorry. So I put that up there to just kind of show, we actually did a portrait of a graduate, which is pretty common. And that's, ultimately when you see where you want your students to be when they graduate high school and move on. So we did that work. It's very student driven and it's very common. And so we put that up there to just show this is the origin of where you're now seeing portrait of teachers across New Hampshire and other places in the United States. And then where we're going with it is portrait of an educator and then defining educator as everyone, which that's why the image is up there, is to kind of show the evolution.
I would also add lifelong learner as a, because what you're really teaching is how to learn,
Yes.
and not some subjects, so,
Yes.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was a reflection of what our community inputs said were most important to them. There were a lot of different things that other places have in their portrait of a graduate, but our 7 communities came to the table and we've got thousands of inputs. And of those inputs, these were the pillars that were most important in our context for our community, for our parents and our taxpayers, because it wasn't all parents that came to our sessions. Even in Chesterfield, we had folks who had no kids, no ties to the school, but they wanted to see these qualities in the students that they are supporting with their tax dollars. So that, no argument with what your input is. This was a reflection of what our community told us.
Is this in any particular order?
I'm just curious to whether you have bus drivers included in your.
So that's a connection that we have not made yet because we outsource that service, that they're not actually our employees. And more specifically, we just changed our company this year, so it's a new company for us this year compared to what we used in the past. So that is a connection that we will be able to make, I think, with our new contracted service, that will say, hey, look, here are the expectations that we have for students. Here are the expectations that we have for all of our educators. But we haven't done that. They don't even have an office in town yet. In fact, I'm renting them space from one of my buildings so they could just be up and running. That's how new they are.
In
Maybe
terms
that's the
of-
time to change. That's the time to train them, yeah.
In terms of having contact with kids, it's for many of them, it's their first contact and their last contact.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah, I'd say just to tag on to that question, we just launched this to the entire SAU a few weeks ago. And it's going up in all the buildings. There's a lot of images everywhere. Teachers are gonna have it starting to flow into their classrooms. And I think part of that is building a culture around this. And sometimes that takes time to build a culture around a common uniting document. And so as that develops, I do see that not only just our bus drivers, but also anyone who's coming into our buildings to work with our students. Students are gonna be very familiar with this. They'll know this is what we're holding ourselves to. And so they'll be able to even hold us accountable at some point by referencing this portrait of an educator. So,
Yeah, we've got a lot of partners that come into our schools and provide supplemental learning as well, that we will eventually roll this out with them. But we had to start with the mass, and the mass are the folks that we employ and sign their paychecks.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Such an inspiring thing to start with.
We have hearing next. Really good that we are not made out of it. So, item for this. So. With that, I think the board can simply discuss. I don't feel that necessarily the need to go into non-public session unless the board wants to fully discuss the material in here. I'd be open to going to non-public, but if there doesn't need to be a big discussion, maybe we can just take a vote. Do you guys feel the need to? This is a very non-complicated case, so I'm okay if you guys would like to just have a motion and a vote. What do you think? Always filled up, haven't you?
Oh.
Move the state board accept the hearing officer's report and adopts the hearing officer's recommendations.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Okay.
I guess we should say that was disregarded to the very Exeter School Board.
Parent,
Fairness.
student found.
Founders, yeah.
That was
Not
Founders.
Yeah, Founders Academy.
So. Epsom wasn't first.
No, Epsom's not.
Am I in
You're looking at the wrong month.
I'm in the wrong month again. I did that when I started preparing for the meeting. I went through all the first ones and read them all again and realized
You're on the wrong month.
I'm in the wrong month.
Okay, all right. So that's, Founders, you guys are all set, thank you.
Yeah.
We have an 11 a.m. public hearing, which is quite a ways off. CTE, Laura, are we doing Plymouth State? Did we bump them?
Nope, it was Franklin Pierce, so I'm just messaging Laura to see.
Okay.
It's ready. I can see that Steve Appleby's on, so I think maybe he'll be able to. I don't know.
Cruising through.
I was looking at this portrait of an educator, and I'm like, you can make a modern, you call it iced tea. Thanks for that. Super memorable.
I like that.
Let Rob know that.
You catch that, Rob?
Quite sure.
You could make a mnemonic with a talent, but
Okay, so if you just switch a couple letters here, or like order, you could have iced tea as the mnemonic. So everyone remembers iced tea.
Yeah, switch connection and engagement.
Be here in 2 minutes.
you could even reach out to Ice-T.
Iced tea, I mean, like a video for
Dorset.
Might get him to be a keynote at one of our events.
Look at it.
Drew, Laura's gonna be here in just a minute. They're coming, they're on the way.
See, Steve.
Yep.
Not yet. We're waiting for Laura.
I don't know if Brian's here or not.
Brian is here.
Oh, okay, good.
So.
You mind if we pull those down?
No,
while we're
please.
waiting?
Yeah, no, that's, we don't want to hold you down.
I tell you this.
Yeah, executive summary, that's where it is.
Angela?
Yeah.
Did Laura?
She's right there.
Please don't get more praise than we realize they do. I hope everybody does.
No, I I'm sit on the side.
I was following along. I swear you were on public hearings.
We were, and then all of a sudden, boom, we're up to you.
Flying like, well, that's a good thing, right? It's all good. That's why we come early.
All right, over to you.
Good morning. Welcome, Commissioner Davis. Laura Stoneking, the administrator for the Bureau of Educator Preparation and Higher Ed. To my left is Dr. Tanya Sturts, Dean of Accreditation at Penn State, also Chair of the Council for Teacher Ed. To my right, I'll let actually Brian introduce, because I'll botch it. Brian Walker, Director of the Home Center at Plymouth State University for their ed prep programs.
And I'm Nate Bowditch, I'm the provost at Plymouth State.
And so Plymouth has submitted a request for an 18-month extension, given the current environment with our USNH systems. So, but they can answer any questions you may have regarding the request.
I have questions. Well, I guess I do. If you guys could, and just as a big picture kind of thing, everything was fine. I just wonder if you had the opportunity to maybe just update us on sort of the bigger picture, look at your look at the programs and what you're thinking about. I know maybe it's too early for that, but just sort of I'm trying to understand exactly what you guys are thinking in terms of, I know there's a lot of organization, a lot of universities going through this, so just curious to see where you guys are.
I could give a two-parter. I'll give the big overview and then with specifics to programs, I'll turn it over to Brian. So as you know, like everywhere, we're feeling the pinch across the USNH system, and at Plymouth State we have been. And I think everyone's worked hard to manage the change and stay sustainable through this. But we're at a place where we need to make significant changes. And it's true across the system. So at Plymouth State, back in a Board of Trustees meeting on June 9th, we submitted a proposal for a major restructuring of our academic area and our programs. It also includes a reduction in faculty, which is difficult work, but it's got to be done. We're just at a place. And so our goal is to really back to mission, back to what our students need, stay school committed to our students in the workforce and the needs in New Hampshire. So we're moving from a really dispersed academic structure to one that really focuses on our strengths, application in certain areas, including new school of education, where we're going to bring together and strengthen our ed programs.
And if I could just ask, just to follow up on that, I know we know UNH to go through this, like private universities around the country, right, doing stuff similar. You know, what is the? I think we sort of hear and absorb that the driving force for this is just enrollment trends. Is that true for you guys? Like, how can you just give us a little sense of what that looks like for you?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, we're built for a student body that's about 20+% bigger than we are. And we've tried through the natural levers available to you over time and attrition and things like that, but we haven't been able to keep pace with the demographic changes. And they're obvious. I mean, you look at birth rates across the state, across New England, it's that part isn't mysterious. And then the other part, which is a bit mysterious, is just the cost structure. Continues in all of our areas, whatever part of the economy you're in, cost structures change, and those pressures together, we have to make significant changes.
Yeah, and then you add on to that state budget considerations like this last budget, that's like on top of that, but it doesn't.
Yeah,
that's not the only reason, right? That's.
Oh, no, I mean, that's a factor, sure. But this would have happened regardless. And if you look across the country, it's not just because we're in New Hampshire. Everyone across the country is struggling with this reality.
Yeah, how do you and I don't want to monopolize your time, I just find this really interesting and I think it's really important for New Hampshire. And I'm really grateful that you guys are taking that reexamination. And you had mentioned sort of having this, I think the word you used, but kind of a loose system. There was a trend for a long time in higher ed to kind of be all things to all people and try to do so many different things and attract this cohort of students and this cohort and these interests. And now you're at a place because of the demographic changes that you've got to sort of refocus. How hard is that? Like, you guys obviously had a big thing to do that, right? To say we're going to focus on that core mission. So I just wondered if you could just elaborate just a little bit on what that looks like for Plymouth State to say, what are you like focusing on? What does that core look like for Plymouth State?
So it's, luckily, we've had, President Burks has been at Plymouth State, this is starting his 11th year.
Yeah.
And he had a real vision to say, okay, the regional comprehensive model isn't going, he could see a decade ago that that model wasn't, we can't be everything to everyone. So he really said, okay, let's focus on applied interdisciplinary programs, which is what the workforce needs and what students need to be successful. You need, the hyper niched undergraduate degree for Plymouth State students is not what they need. They need something where they're going to develop a broad skill set with some disciplinary expertise in an area or two. They can take to the workforce, to grad school, whatever they want to do. So we've been thinking about this a long time. I think the other part of the answer, so this is really the full realization of that vision. We've taken it in steps. It's huge change. Academia, especially higher ed, is notorious for being slow to change. Culture change is very difficult. So, then the other thing is, I'm impressed and pleased that the USNH system is acknowledging this reality and working together.
Yes.
We can't all do the same thing, compete with each other. We've got to, be really clear on what our strengths are. We've been, educating New Hampshire educators for 154 years. That's where we started. Strong school of business, certain applied areas. We are not everything to everyone. And so this restructuring and working across the system, I work very closely with the provosts and the other teams across the system.
At some point, you're just cannibalizing each other's students,
Yeah.
right?
No, and the numbers show that. And so we are really, over the last few years, we've been really deliberate to say, let's focus on our strengths and collaborate rather than compete.
Yeah.
Can you share a snapshot? You mentioned 20%, but 10 years ago, what was your enrollment to today?
And also, to that, if you can add, what are the out of state and international student percentages?
Not that we expect you to know this off the top of your
I
head.
don't know.
I'm starting my senior year at this state, so I can't speak from personal experience. Tanya and Brian both know better than I do. But roughly, I would say we were about 4,000 undergraduates 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And we're right around 3,000 right now. Our grad enrollments dipped quite precipitously 4 or 5 years ago. We really turned that curve and we're improving there, largely in part to our education programs, and Brian's work and Tanya's work. So yeah, we've had over 200, we were close to 250 full-time faculty for 4,000 students, and at 3,000 students, we're right now in a place where we need to make some changes to adapt.
Sure. All right.
And what about out of state or?
Oh, it's interesting, it shifts,
Yeah.
not drastically for Plymouth State, I think, and the dynamic of the three institutions is somewhat different, but we're between 50-50 and 60-40. And we have been, and I don't see that changing significantly.
Out of state is 50-50?
Yeah, in-state, out of state, roughly 50-50 to
60-40.
60-40, but, and that varies sort of, it's somewhat
So that
cyclical.
includes international too?
And yeah, we do not have our primary international student body at Plymouth State. We are very local. We are very New Hampshire, very New England in terms of where we recruit. We do have expanded international, but it's mostly student athletes is the largest, and they come because of where we are and all we offer to a student athlete.
Hockey and skiing.
You can see and recognize our ski team from a mile away on campus.
Because many universities have kind of moved on to attracting international students to kind of compensate.
Yeah, and I was a big advocate for that. I spent over a decade of my career at the American University in Cairo in Egypt, so I really see the value of both directions of international the student exchange. I think at this particular moment, we're glad we didn't lean into that. This is a really tough time. If you were depending on 20-30% of your student population being international, you're really in a tougher spot than we already are.
And I would assume Plymouth is like Keene State, that the international, it's more like a global exchange for like a semester or a year, and our students go and then other students will come.
Yeah.
And that seems to be, I think, our bigger numbers.
Yeah.
Right. So there is some.
Thanks. You want to add anything on the education?
I'm just gonna bring him every time I go. Like I just got.
You're boss to work.
I'll just say, I think behalf of the education programs, I think it's challenge, all the challenges that we have here right now. I think it's actually some of the restructuring is gonna be really beneficial for our education programs. So, and I look forward to, you know, what we have going forward and bringing our programs together under one college and school. I think this extension gives us time to kind of implement some of these changes, to kind of work through some of the things that have to happen. And, you know, I'm cautiously optimistic. That's the terminology I'm using.
Okay, well, I'm just optimistic.
Okay, just optimistic.
But we're literally, we started and announced the implementation of the move to this new structure at the end of August, our first full faculty meeting. So we are in the trenches for the next full year.
Yeah.
Do you have a strong entrepreneurship program?
Yes. Our School of Business is very much, again, this theme of making sure our programs are applied and very connected to local and New Hampshire businesses and regional businesses. So yeah, we have a very strong innovation and entrepreneurship
So
program.
I work with several universities,
Yeah.
and they're kind of adopting entrepreneurship programs to
Yeah.
improve the status of the university, bring in more students, because we have more startups, more entrepreneurs. People want to be there because you're creating ecosystems, and so that kind of internal, bootstrapping.
Yeah,
to
so
change
we call our School of Business the Innovation and Entrepreneurship Cluster, where we bring together programs. And we just, with great state support, thank you, New Hampshire, we just did a renovation of our School of Business that we've restructured the physical space to make sure we're partnering with external partners and really encouraging entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about it later.
Yeah, anytime. Come on up. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of Plymouth State's like core strengths, that business program, and I mean, you're perfect. That's what Plymouth State should do, right? You guys, where you're located, you know, that homegrown entrepreneurs, self-starting businesses, and that's for that part of the state, so.
And that's why we started I don't know if anyone knows, but we're the first in New Hampshire to have an accredited by NECHI, our accreditor, New England Commission on Higher Education, 3-year, 96 credit bachelor's degree programs, which we initiated, and one of them is in small business administration.
Yeah.
Again, what do our students need? And they're in New Hampshire, a lot of them need that skill set.
And kudos to you guys for doing that as a 3-year program and for getting that accreditation. I've talked to university administrators, different schools, and like one of the struggles they have is the accreditation is so focused on 4-year program. It makes it difficult for them to even propose a 3-year degree program.
We did it in 1 year, from the harebrained idea to approval from NECHI and now taking in students. So it's a real great team effort.
So, but they still have the same course load, but done in 3 years?
Yeah, so it's not 120 credits
No.
compressed into, so, because there are lots of people who do that. If you just cram and take courses in the summer and take 22, 25 credit, no, it's fewer credits. It's proportionally 25% fewer credits.
Oh,
It's
Yeah.
usually the elective type courses that
Just-
are not,
Yeah.
it's much more an applied.
It's a much more, so you still get a broad general education, which is required by our accreditor, and we want our citizens and students to be responsible and prepared for that. And then the rest of it is a really applied education in these 5 areas.
actually, most of the courses that are taught for accreditation is not what the industry wants anyways.
Yeah.
So you could actually very easily cut down a lot of those.
Sorry, Rich. That's just an example of, I think, how you guys are making the right kind of adjustments, to this reality. When you see the survey results from kids, and one of the reasons they're not going to 4-year programs is they don't see the value in this. They would stay taking 4 years of their lives to get a degree and have to take all the electives they're required. I'm a big proponent of electives and core courses and liberal arts, but it's not for everybody, right?
Yeah.
And that's why you see these enrollment trends. But anyway,
Is
I like to hear that.
Plymouth State part of the academy program?
No, I actually don't know. You asked that.
The-
program?
It's, students can finish their last year of high school and take,
gen eds.
Oh, Career Academy?
I think it's
Oh,
the,
okay.
the community college.
Yeah.
It is in the community. There's a lot of dual enrollments and
Yeah.
actually, I think most schools, high schoolers, they can take some
Yeah.
courses at the college. Sometimes it's not always easy time-wise, but there's a lot of opportunities for high school students. Yeah.
So, I moved State Board of Education approve an 18-month extension from March 31st, 2026 to September 30th, 2027 for the corresponding below 12 Fs and associate levels.
Sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, congrats, thanks for the update on all that.
Thank you. Thanks for the support.
You're doing.
Nice. Yeah.
Are you going to the kitchen?
I will, so you-
Remember the water. Thank you. I normally have brought my own, but he's not here. Okay, so on the, so I went through these, I just wanna, before we get to the whole, well, as we go through this whole rule. I wanna talk about the first two, A and B, the physical ed and health teacher. So I was going through these and I don't know if you guys remember, we had these at our last meeting. And we kind of sat back for some, let's talk a little bit more about these, and they came back with some revisions that I think still need more work. So, I suggested, Steve and I talked yesterday, and I think I would like to just make a motion, if it's okay with you guys, to table these two. They don't have to be passed today, so we have a little more time. Cause I just think they need more work on what we want the rule to say. What the requirements are. There's some strike throughs that I think should stay, and we're gonna talk about some of the language in there, so, it's okay with you guys.
If it's not ready, then.
Yeah, I just feel like it could use more work before we get to the initial stage, and we can flesh things out with PSB on what they wanna see, what we wanna see. So. If nobody has any objections, I'll go ahead and make a motion to table. Phys ed teacher and health teacher. Simon, okay. All in favor? Okay. And to get the vote, but that's one. Okay, so educator records and criminal history records check.
Good morning. For the record, Steve Appleby, Director, Department of Education.
Julie Shea, Administrative Roles Coordinator.
And this initial proposal is primarily some housekeeping and cleanup, just like we've done with our forms and some other areas, just trying to consolidate, condense, update. And anytime we make a change, we have to make it across everything. So.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, the final proposal that's a little bit later, we consolidated a lot of the forms, and in looking at those forms, we realized some of the forms that were in that section really belonged in another place because they didn't actually have to do with teacher licensing. One of them being a name change request, the other one being a credential verification. And so we went through and tried to find where would these forms actually belong. And so we put them in these sections and then updated a little bit and, you know, added the website for where you can actually find the credentials. And so, you know, cleaned it up in that way. So there's 3 sections here where all of those different forms went. And then the last piece is the criminal history record check where we added in the first time licenses because it just had the bus drivers there. And so again, we moved that from the general application instructions because it's not actually a license, it's clearance. So it's just organized in a way that makes a little bit more sense with the content.
Questions on that? Educator records and criminal history records check.
I move that the state board approve the initial proposal for ED 502.02-.03 and ED 504.05 and ED 504.12 relative to educator records and educator credentials.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Final proposal, general application instructions and forms.
More forms. So, thanks to Julie and the team's efforts, we've consolidated our number of forms dramatically, as well as cleaned up some areas where items were missing on certain forms but present on other forms, so we've just rationalized some of that. I think we had 18 forms at one time and now.
Yes, there were 18. And then the other piece, if you look at the comments from OLS in that initial draft, one of the things about rulemaking is you can incorporate your forms by reference, but some items can't be incorporated by reference. So if we're asking for a valid government issued ID, we have to put that in the rule text and it can't just be listed on the form. And so we went through the forms to make sure those were all consistent and that the pieces that weren't to be incorporated by reference were actually listed in the rule text.
So how many forms are there now?
8.
8, and what has that done to your manpower needs?
Well,
They're not adopted yet, but.
right, yeah, so I don't know, but honestly, it doesn't affect manpower too much because it just consolidates in most of these forms. We have to have a paper version of what's in the EIS system, the Educator Information System, I should say. And so by consolidating, they don't look exactly the same in EIS anyway. So it's not necessarily that we're consolidating them in EIS so much as consolidating the occasional paper form we get.
Right. Over time, there were more forms and more forms made to accommodate what was in EIS. And then it became clear that perhaps we could consolidate the forms back down so that we weren't repetitive, like asking for a lot of the same information that could have been all asked on one form.
Whereas EIS is more so a situation where when you're filling out a form and you check a box and you go to the next screen, it's already the correct information. It's not redundant, right? So if it's a new application, it's asking new application information. If it's a name change, it's asking name change, not new application. So that already was streamlined in EIS. We're just now the paper's catching up.
How long do you keep forms?
Forms get scanned into the educator's account and kept forever.
This reminds me of what was uncovered, last year, that building, underground building that housed how many documents in the federal government?
Oh, they,
Social Security holds.
the Social Security, in the cave, yeah. No, but I remember in the old one. Yeah, there were boxes of
I have
records
nightmares.
that were like from educators decades ago that you still had and were stored because nobody was.
The rule says we have to keep them.
Yeah.
Even if they're expired, we have to keep them. We had in excess of 85 5-drawer file cabinets, plus probably 200 to 300 file boxes of records when I arrived at the department.
Wait for historians, otherwise not that useful.
All of it is over at the state archives
Yeah, good.
or scanned in.
State archives is where they belong. Okay.
I move the State Board of Education approve the final proposal for ED 505.08 relative to the application instructions and related forms for processing educator credentials.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Do you want to just do E through F, E through G? Do you guys have anything to add on those adopt rules? So anybody have any questions about those? If they were,
So we want to adopt
yeah, do you want to just,
as a slate.
yeah, let's do them all in one motion.
Yep, adopt as a slate.
Second.
So let's just be official, we're adopting reading, writing, teacher, reading, writing specialist,
So I
and
guess I couldn't-
specialist in elementary
Look
math.
at my
and pre-K.
agenda.
That's okay. You don't have your glasses on. That's okay. So adopt all three of those. We have, Bill, did you second that?
I seconded it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I really appreciate the language and language skills and competencies and knowledge as opposed to just academic integration.
Yes, I do too. All right, we are from Florian. There's Caitlin Magic that's making this meeting speed through.
Commissioner or something.
All right, Commissioner.
So I'm gonna go down there because I wanna
All right,
actually.
we're just
Change
it up.
Could I do both of my items together? Can I do that?
Yeah,
Or-
go ahead.
Okay.
We stopped hearing the.
I have some documents for
We
everyone.
have a public hearing in 15 minutes, but. we
Yeah,
can-
we have to do that. How many questions y'all have?
Oh, but before you do, really quick, Tim, Can I just say, we have a new chair of the PSB. So Tim Broderick is appointed to the chair of the Professional Standards Board, right? Or selected
After a brutal campaign.
Yeah. So thanks, Tim, for taking up that role. The previous Tom of Liberty had turned out. So appreciate your volunteering to take on those duties.
I look forward to working with you all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, over to you, Commissioner.
Great, thank you for having me. So good morning to the commissioners report for the month of September. First off, we had school start up in the last couple weeks. It's been a relatively uneventful process, at least from the Department of Education, which we always think is a good thing. When school kind of just goes off without a hitch, we don't have individuals reaching out to us. One of the things I think that we always think is positive is that there wasn't a very big heat wave the first 2 weeks of school. That always causes a lot of concern. We always get a lot of media requests for the number of schools and information on their HVAC systems and the number of schools that have ACs. So that did not happen this year. So that was great. We have one new public school that opened this year. It's the Salmon River School in Rochester. That school was a consolidation of 2 schools and redistricting locally. So they opened that new school. They were able to receive 60% of the cost of that project from the state building aid. So that was very exciting. We have 4 new charter schools that have opened or are opening this fall. We have one that's opening next week. And we have 1 new non-public school that was approved to open but does not have any students yet this fall. And then lastly, for the education freedom accounts, the enrollment was expanded to a maximum of 10,000 kids. And they did reach the cap of the 10,000 kids for the August 1st enrollment date, with a wait list of approximately 300 kids the last I spoke to Kate Baker. Relative to another big kind of change since or event since the last state board meeting. So as of July, we were still waiting on potentially $27 million from the federal government as for federal funding that goes to schools. Since July, New Hampshire has received the allocation in those grants. Just a reminder, those grants were Title IIA, which is professional development money, adult education, migrant education, Title IVA, which is safe and supportive schools, and Title III, which is the English language learner funding. So there was some concern federally with the uses of those grants. The U.S. Department of Education had initially withheld those funds, which we traditionally receive in the spring, and then distributed it in August to us, which we have then since distributed to schools. There was a lot of information around that. More recently from the department in the last week, we released our assessment results. And so I did put a quick chart in front of you as far as our assessment results. In most grades and most subjects, we are have increased since fiscal year or since school year 24. I do have planned for the October or November meeting. I'm not sure for the date yet. A comprehensive update from our assessment and accountability team that will go over both the assessment results and any accountability changes where we are. So that information will be coming from the staff of the department.
And these are state test results?
These are the state assessment results for the state staff.
How does it compare with the rest of the country or the states?
So we don't know right now. So states are in the process right now of releasing their information, but states don't, they release it across the different timelines.
Is there a uniformity in measurement?
There is not. So this is the state assessment specifically. One area where it's very comparable is our high school assessment. So we use the SAT in New Hampshire, and many other states use the SAT for their 11th grade assessment. So we will be able to compare. In the past week, national NAEP science results were released. And that as a whole, there was a decline in performance. However, no New Hampshire specific data was released. It was only national data that was released for those NAEP results. And so that is the same measurement that's across them.
Is there something special about the 3rd grade cohort? It appears that's the only cohort that had declined.
Not that I specifically am aware of, but we can talk about that next time.
Yeah, these percentage, I mean, from year to year, these are so close. I mean, this could be I mean, statistically, you see some improvement that is pretty good. 11th grade reading is 3-point gain, right? But
It's just interesting that it's the same cohort
Mm.
that had a decline.
yeah,
I'm sorry,
No,
I'm not sure I'm reading this right. Is the cohort vertical or diagonal? I mean, horizontal or diagonal? Would the cohort be 24 in third grade?
Yeah,
And then-
so that's how the third graders did. So that group of third graders, or fourth graders that had a 52, had a 53 last
Right,
year.
it's the
Yeah,
diagonal.
diagonal.
So the fifth graders of year 2024 were they must have just joined school during COVID.
Correct.
So there's a whole cohort of kids who went through COVID. They may have, I'd love to see the data to see how it has actually changed from past data, and do they have a change in their proficiency?
Yeah, we'll have a comprehensive discussion with the assessment group next time. But I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of this since it's publicly available on our website now and whatnot. Another update that I have for the board and timing wise for the public hearing, are we okay right now?
Yeah.
Okay. So when I said school got off pretty well, for the most part, one of the challenges that we have experienced this the late summer was the Claremont School District and whatnot, and what has been happening there. So in August, the middle of August, the general counsel for Claremont, Jim O'Shaughnessy, reached out to the department with some concerns that he was working with the Claremont School District, all financial in nature. And we have been working together to one, kind of uncover the depth and breadth of those challenges, and then put together a plan to kind of come to the other side of that. So there's a couple different issues that they have uncovered during the work. So the first challenge was that current bookkeeping hadn't been done. So they needed to really come up to speed for the entire last school year and do all of the bookkeeping, do all of the work. And so when Jim O'Shaughnessy discovered that, he quickly was able to bring in a comptroller for the school district who has now been named the interim business administrator. His name is Matt Angel. He's been rebuilding the general ledger for the school district for the last year to kind of understand all of the financial concerns that they have from the last school year and going forward. They also are delinquent on their audits. And so they have been reaching out, their audit firm has been reaching out to the department and working with the department to understand, all of the work that needs to come from the department and from the school to come up to speed on all of that. There were some initial concerns whether the school district would have the funding to even open schools this fall. They did open successfully, which we were very happy that happened. There has been a lot of fundraising locally that has happened to ensure that the kids have access to the extracurricular activities that we're planning on happening this fall. That's mostly through the alumni network at the school. And then now the biggest kind of newest change, which has come to light in the last 2 days, is they are considering closing one of their schools right now during the school year. So they have in Claremont 3 elementary schools, a middle school and a high school, and they have proposed closing one of the elementary schools and shifting the kids to the 2 remaining elementary schools. The board is doing that work. And the department continues to be engaged in that work and having open conversations, mostly through Jim O'Shaughnessy. And we're trying to partner with them as much as we can. A lot of this is very much local decision-making that needs to happen. And so, we're continuing to support them and the new administration of the school as much as possible to make sure that all of these changes can happen as cleanly as possible.
How many kids are we talking about?
1,800.
You said something early on, maybe I caught it wrong, but it almost sounded like bookkeeping or financial measures were not taking place. I mean, there's taking place poorly and haphazardly, and then there's not taking place.
So it's our understanding that there are very little to no financial records that could be relied on from the last school year.
Thank you. That's all.
So how many students, you said 1,300, is that how many are in all 3 elementary schools?
That's the entire district. I don't have the breakdown of the individual elementary
Do
schools.
the other 2 schools have room, or will they be in ratio?
So the school is working to determine all of that. They have reached out to clarify the student ratios and kind of all of the requirements. They have said publicly that class sizes will increase because of this, which that obviously makes sense. But as far as other decisions, those are being made locally, and we're going to continue to support them through that challenge.
Well, just in your conversations with the department's conversations, I know there's a lot of ongoing back and forth with them. If they identify anything that's, in rules or regulations that are causing a problem, just feel free to pass along, and we're happy to help. I know when you're going through a situation like this, there might be regulations that get in the way. And, we have statutory authority to, in emergency kind of situations, deal with stuff like that, so let them know.
They have not requested that at this time, but they know that we're willing to partner with them to, in any way that we can with this transition and this work. So. One thing that has come to light with this, and we'll probably have other conversations about that, the rules for the responsibility or the duties of school board members are expired. And so we need to work together to update those and those responsibilities.
Could some of that be responsible for the procedural lapse?
No.
Okay, I always, whenever I hear something like this, I'm like, is it an individual or is it process and procedure and oversight? It's sad. It's just
We'll learn a
thinking
lot
out loud.
more as this goes forward, but I don't think this is a rules issue. I mean, we see on a pretty regular basis, if you just even follow news coverage in New Hampshire, every year or so, there's a school district that has a business administration issue with finding money missing, or misspent. I mean, it happens a lot. But it's usually in the couple $100,000 range. I think, was Auburn had an issue a year or so ago, and it was several $100,000, but the sheer scale of this mismanagement at Claremont is something we've never seen before. So it's getting a lot of headlines, justifiably so, but just general like business administration mistakes or mismanagement, like it happens on a pretty regular basis across the state. It just doesn't make these kind of headlines. And I don't mean that it happens in every school district by any means, just there's a story or so every year, about something at a relatively small scale. So
I just always go back to checks and balances.
Yep.
And oversight of the board and treasurers and.
But I think the commissioner point that, these rules should not be expired, but it's an opportunity for us to look at strengthening that oversight at the local level, because that's ultimately the responsibility for the school board to be doing that. Making sure your audits are done, making sure that your books are properly done, having that kind of oversight. And I think some of the examples we've seen over the years are, a local school board that doesn't have the understanding of how to do that oversight.
We had conversations preliminary with the School Boards Association and the Superintendent's Association about developing between the department and those two associations, developing some best practices for both superintendents and school boards, specifically around fiscal management. And so we're going to continue to work with those groups to put that documentation together. We never want to see a situation like this happen. However, they can be learning opportunities, and there's going to be a lot to be learned from this Claremont situation, and there will be statewide improvements that come out of this situation. I do want to add to, as of right now, no evidence of fraud or malfeasance has been presented to the department. It's mostly just mismanagement. So we'll continue to stay closely aligned to kind of that, and they're updating us on a very regular basis relative to that.
I I appreciate it as an opportunity to learn and how we can, having been on a local school board, like, you know, just well-intentioned human beings might not have, you know, there's the conversation with the charter board, there's no requirement that in the local school board has any business experience, right? Like, so that it turns into this, yeah, I think we could have some lessons learned, that we might be able to work into the rules, given the unfortunate that they've expired, but fortunate that
There's
gives
a
opportunity to do
situation
something.
here with those local school boards of oftentimes not knowing what you don't know. You don't
You're trained
know.
by your local business administrator and superintendent.
Right, if you just, I mean, we've seen commentary in the press from school board members who said, well, I just trust the superintendent. My logistics."
That's policy and procedures
Yeah.
that should be in there, like the board, the treasurer, the board sign off on certain things, going over certain amounts. There should be so many checks and balances between a board and a financial team and administration that doesn't allow for this. That's just my gut knee jerk.
Unless the board doesn't have that training or those policies to advise them.
Yeah, that's it. That's.
I think you probably find it, for the commissioner on this one, but there's probably a large bell curve as to how much boards know about the actual financial situation of their district, depending on the business manager and the.
It goes back to what I was talking, and it's not just about charter schools, it's about board acumen and training and responsibility and fiscal responsibility in general, just all boards.
I think that not to turn this into like big debate, the conversation, but like, we see this in stark relief with charter schools because they're on such a razor thin margin and they can't just raise more taxes, certainly. Whereas now we're seeing it, I think this is catching such media attention and our attention because of the scope of it, right? It's just such a large amount of money. If this had been $100,000, you hear about it and it might like.
It'd be a local story then, we have to do the public hearing. I can open it and you can keep presenting to us, but I know I have to open the public hearing, so we're gonna open the public hearing on school counselor rules. Is anybody signed up to speak on that? Anyone? Okay, so we'll
Don't
keep that.
believe so. I don't believe anybody signed up. I'll double check.
The last thing as far as the commissioners update, well, did we have any other questions about Claremont?
Thank you for.
And I'll continue to keep the board updated. If something emergency happens, I'll make sure that message is brought forward. The last thing that's in front of you today, is the state's technical advisory relative to cell phone policies. So you all likely know that one of Governor Ayott's priorities this year for education was bell-to-bell cell phone ban. That was, there was standalone legislation that initially proposed establishing it. It was also included in House Bill 2 from the governor's presentation or first version of House Bill 2. That language was passed. The language is on the advisory in front of you. 3 weeks ago, the Department of Education developed a draft advisory, sent it out to schools to solicit feedback and commentary. We had some very thoughtful feedback that was provided by schools, and then we used that to finalize the technical advisory. So that is in front of you right now. The Department of Education has also, so we notified schools that this policy, or this technical advisory, which requires a local policy. You know, I'm switching between terminology there. So we've sent that out. And in addition to sending that out, the Department of Education has developed 2 surveys, one for teachers and one for administration at the school level to kind of get some feedback relative to the current situation with cell phones. And then the Department of Education then plans to send out some surveys in several months from now to solicit feedback from those same groups of folks to understand, you know, if the policy requirements are working, and if the bell-to-bell plan is, you know, providing or is working in the way that we envisioned it working. So we're very excited about that work. We have had initially a lot of very positive feedback specifically from teachers, and we're looking forward to continuing forward with that work.
Go ahead, Raj.
No, so is this only for cell phones or also for any digital
So
devices?
personal devices as well.
So again, in many places, they use their cell phone for classes, notes, or for tablets, computers.
So there are exemptions for instruction, so the definition of cell phone, which is defined in technical advisory, means a personal device capable of making calls, transmitting pictures or videos, sending messages through electronic means. So that was include, I think, actually, one of the largest concern was Apple Watches and, or those types of, watches and whatnot.
Most of the apps that is available, it's also available on computers, so that's why I was asking.
Correct.
How do you stop them from even getting on?
Yes,
Facebook?
so I mean, we're going to continue to work through that, and, we really wanted to empower teachers to be able to say, you're not, you're in violation of the cell phone policy. That's why it was important for us to put that, language in there about not accessible during the day, so, it's powered off and not accessible. And so, if a teacher sees a cell phone, that means that it's accessible and the teacher can do something about that.
It has to be physically powered off, or is it in one of those yonder bags, Faraday?
So,
bags or
so
something,
the
or-
state didn't specify that, and so some local schools have invested in yonder bags, some are doing it in other ways. We did want to make sure that schools had invested in yonder bags, had the ability to continue to use those yonder bags locally. I think it's going to be very interesting to see the impacts of this in several months.
It's such a necessary step.
And this may or may not be the time to ask you this, but based on the statements we had during public comment, the second commenter, I'm wondering if you could, in the future, give us some kind of update on what is out there with regard to parental notification.
Sure, and I made a note to look into that, change in law as well, so I will do that.
Thank you.
I have a question, if you're looking at, doing these surveys that you talked about, is there an opportunity to maybe survey the students?
So, we are talking about that, it would be a non-academic survey, so we need
Yeah.
to make sure that we follow all the rules around that. We got the first two out right away.
Yeah.
And then we're going to continue to engage on what is the appropriate way to do that from the
Yeah.
department. There's no way for the department to do that directly, so we will have to, obviously communicate and work through schools to do that. But I do think that the student voice is an important voice in this conversation as well.
Yeah, I think so too, and one of the things I'd like to hear from the students is, why are they using their phones in class? Why are they, what is are they using the phones as a distraction because they're bored? Do they feel like they have to keep in touch with what are they doing with their phones prior to this year in the classroom setting, in the environment during the school day? How are they using those? I think hearing from them about their motivations and what they're using them for would be interesting and maybe help us understand what's going on. We have some national surveys of students, and when you ask them if they feel engaged in the classroom, they don't. And the numbers of students who say they're bored, they don't feel like the school day, like they're maximizing their time, they don't feel like they're using their time well. Large percentages of high school students say that on national surveys. So I'd be interested to hear from the New Hampshire students that context. If we have the opportunity to do that, that would be interesting.
Yeah, what I see in just having the phone in the class alone takes their attention. One messages back and forth.
Oh, yeah.
I recently heard kids were using this high frequency ping so that the teacher can't hear when they get a message. Because older people can't get the higher frequencies. So, they know there's a message that came and then nobody else knows. Okay. There are ways to work around, but it's always a distraction.
Oh, no, it's definitely always a distraction. I'm just curious as to, getting beyond, so I think when we've talked, not us, just in general, the conversation for the last so many years nationally on school cell phones use is that the cell phones are the problem. The cell phones are a distraction, which is true, they are. I like the bell-to-bell ban. But I don't think we're asking the bigger question is,
that of course.
Why are they bringing them in the first place? If they're bored, if we're not engaging them and keeping their attention in class so that they want to, and I get that there's addictive behaviors about all that, I understand all that. But if they're seeking a distraction because they aren't doing hands-on work and they don't feel like the work they're doing is relevant, that's a problem we have to address too. So I think if we could try to drill down on that to the extent we can, that would be really.
So this has been part of my research and work for quite some time.
Yeah.
You know, we give a lot of content in school without context. You know, there's no project, hands-on experience. We just given stuff to memorize and write in exams. That is absolutely boring. Anything that they can find on the web, you know, you just listen to the class that they can learn on the web today.
Yeah. I mean, everybody who's got kids in middle school and above today, like, kids will come home and say, you know, oh, the school's boring. And the first thing they do is go to YouTube to watch an instructional video. They want to learn.
In some of the schools, I'm helping them create interdisciplinary hands-on projects.
Yeah.
You know, physics and history together, working on things about everything has to be on projects so that they learn both the history and physics at the same time. You know, we are talking about how did the Vikings go to some place. They need to know how to make buoyancy boats, their history, all these kind of things to create things so that they can learn something together. You know, it's not just the one subject or the other.
Well, that, like in the UK, that's how they teach us. Like you do your physics and your math and your history all in one class. And so you'll take sailing exploration, for example, and you'll do everything. So you'll learn the history of it, but you'll also learn how sextants work, and you'll learn navigation, and like you'll do how to build a boat. Like you learn everything, and it's really hands-on.
So I'm helping them create maker labs in schools where all the projects come together, especially in Japan. So action and project-based learning is so critical now.
Yeah, it is. Okay.
Yes, so the conversation is sort of
Bigger conversation.
broadened, but like, so having done a turn on a local school board policy commission or committee, my eyes were open as to how much NHSBA, like they do policies and like draft policies recommended, and the school districts are just like, yep, this looks good, right? Like, or we do little minor edits and everything, just because there's so much. So I really appreciate getting to see the technical advisory, because my mind immediately went to, I know that they're their own thing, but like what sort of collaborative partnership do we have with them with like, hey, how might we like work together to help influence what a draft of policy?
So we throughout this process have had open discussions with the School Boards Association, specifically around this advisory. So they gave us their preliminary policy before we had even started putting out our TA, which was very helpful. They did review this and they provided some feedback in addition to the schools, and we were able to incorporate some of that into our technical advisory.
Super.
So that was a very helpful process, and they were a good partner to work with. The school boards, the Superintendent's Association has also partnered with us and a third-party organization that puts together little videos, kind of informational videos about cell phones. And so we have started a social media campaign to release some information, and we can make sure the board has all of that information as well, so you can watch our videos.
Super appreciate the collaborative approach to it.
By the way, there are hacks around opening your Yondu bag. You know, circular magnets, and there are kids who actually walk around the So if one person can design it, another person can.
That's exactly correct.
As Phil, I also sat on the policy committee at my local school
Fun time.
board. It was definitely fun times, especially when you realized that some of the policies were 10, 15, or 20 years beyond the date they were supposed to be revised. I'm curious, we relied heavily on this New Hampshire School Boards Association to provide us with templates. But is that something that the Department of Education also does?
The department does not do draft policy templates.
But they're collaborative.
Or should they?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So you have a consultation on here?
We do. I'm gonna grab my information from there.
It's not working, so you might want to stay over there.
Okay. So, thank you again. So many of you know, before I was Commissioner of the Department of Education, I was a director at the Department of Education. I was the director of the Division of Education Analytics and Resources. So my promotion to commissioner has left a critical vacancy at the Department of Education. So today, pursuant to RSA 21N3, Roman numeral 3, I'm here to consult with the State Board of Education about a replacement for myself to be the new division director of the Division of Education Analytics and Resources. So in front of you, you'll have a packet that I put in front of you, which is the resume for Dr. Nathaniel Green. This is a name that you all know and recognize and have done a lot of work in the department. So Nate has worked with me in my division since 2019. He's been at the department for a little before that. He has a wealth of experience and knowledge from both the department and from working at the schools. He's worked at a variety of schools in the state of New Hampshire, including a charter school, a non-public school, a district public school, and then for the last 6 years has been administrator at the department. You all know him, you've seen him here as frequently as you've seen me, and I'm very excited to be able to present him as my replacement at the department. I did, for informational purposes, put in front of you the org chart for my division, for my old division. So you can see the work, so that's the colored piece of paper. I know the writing is very small, so I apologize for that. But you can see the work and the positions that are in that division. There are also a number of consultants and contractors that work with the division that do work for positions that we haven't been able to fill that are not on this org chart. But the division consists of the Bureau of Federal Compliance, the Bureau of Assessment and Accountability, where Nate is currently the administrator of, the Bureau of Educational Statistics, which that's where we do our data collection, the Bureau of Educational Opportunities, that's actually where Nate started at the department, or started in my division, the Bureau of School Facilities, and the Bureau of School Finance. I'm very fortunate that in this division, in this group of individuals, all of the administrators could have stepped in and taken my position. It was more of a convincing somebody to do it rather than wondering who had the abilities and skills and knowledge. Obviously, promoting Nate to a division director will leave a hole relative to the Bureau of Assessment and Accountability. However, he also has a very talented team of individuals that will be able to step up and fill that void.
I like it. Good pick.
Yeah.
Thanks, good.
Just real quick.
Yeah.
That, obviously Nate's great, like I totally super supportive. One thing that struck me though when I saw the org chart was how many vacant roles there are. Like, can you speak at all to like efforts to try to fill those? That seems concerning. Sure, it was to you.
Yeah, so it is concerning, not all of the positions we have funding for. And then also, we do have a requirement now to get a waiver to fill all vacant positions, and so that has caused some delays with filled positions. I do want to point out at least 3 of the vacant positions that we have on here, the ones that are all on the right side of your paper, or sorry, 4 of them. Those are positions that belong to a grant that are starting soon. And so those are ones that we're in phase 1 of the grant right now. Once we get into phase 2, those will be filled. Same with, there's another one in the Bureau of Statistics. It starts with a 9T. That's that exact same kind of, actually 2 of them, the 8T and the 9T. Those are grant funded positions that we're not into that phase of the grant to fill those positions. But it is very challenging to fill positions at the state. It has been an ongoing challenge that I've experienced my entire 15-year tenure at the department. It is always a priority of me to fill the positions, but to also make sure that we have somebody that is the right fit. And I've been able to do that with this division, and I'm looking forward to doing that for the entire department.
And how is everything of the operation?
So we very frequently in state government ask people to do more with less.
That's exactly what it is.
All right. Thank you.
Good choice.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I love the concern about it.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. We'll do well. All right, so we have a public hearing that's got to continue. Nobody was speak, but we can get to our consent agenda.
Yes.
Did anybody have any issues on the meeting minutes or cooperative district?
Second.
Okay, motion to approve the meeting minutes in the Hallsburg Line Cooperative School District, seconded by Phil, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Anybody have anything for open board discussion? We're obviously the big board composition thing is just kind of on hold, we're waiting to get some more info on that.
Any movement or possibility of touching on the whole board composition discussion?
Yeah, so we're, the legal team is they're working on getting us sort of a legal review of if we require certain things, how are our requirements affected by state statute? What can we require? So if we were to require, business experience, obviously we're going to try to define these terms for one thing. So I think we'll need some help from our legal team in making clear to boards what we mean when we have these terms. So that's one thing they're looking at. But it'll also potentially touch on other statutes and rules. So they're trying to do a review of, hey, if we want to impose some requirements on these charter school boards. Here are the rules and statutes that affect that and how we would have to word things and what authority we have. So we just want to make sure it has a thorough legal review before we take the next step. So that's what it is now. And it's on a back burner for them because they've been dealing with some other issues, but that's where we are on that. So.
Have we heard anything from our friends at our charter school that we followed closely all summer?
No, one in Claremont?
Yeah.
Yes, interesting that. Things are going on in Claremont. No updates from them that I have. Do you have anything?
They have been working with the charter school office downstairs. I know they've made some progress. I'm not sure how much of the progress they've made. If we think it's appropriate, maybe we should have them come in for the October meeting. Does that sound?
Yeah, if we
Saw them almost every meeting.
Yeah.
Did they come in December, I think, for an update?
It was December, yeah, so we wanted to give them time to. Implement the changes, so I think they're supposed to come back. It's a good question.
Do you want to wait till December?
Yeah, we can wait. I was just curious, once we opened the gate, people actually then enrolled and.
We can ask the charter school office to just give us some numbers.
Actually, one of the things I was gonna say in my update anyways, school enrollment comes out November 15th of every year. We've already had many requests for what all of the opening enrollments are, but we collect it in October and gather it all. And then, so November 15th is when from all of the schools.
So of the 4 charter schools that are opening this fall, do they all have, will that be included in the enrollment?
Yes,
That would be awesome.
we'll have statewide numbers.
Wonderful, thank you.
And speaking of charter schools, so we have. We have 4 applications for new charter schools. We were gonna have some of them on this meeting and we just decided there's so many and it would take up a big chunk of time. So we're looking at, and I think you guys probably got the email from Angela, to do us just a charter school meeting just for those approvals. And that'll give us the time to feel like we're not rushing anything. I think since we had so many at once.
Can you share with us where they are in the state?
No, I actually don't know. I haven't looked at all the applications, so they were gonna be on this month's agenda and the charter schools office suggested, hey, maybe we wanna just have a separate, because it's a lot of schools, so that's what we're gonna do.
And it looks like the 19th is the date that will work the best. I know Phil I think everyone's responded that they can do both, but Phil has an obligation on the 20th, so I'll confirm once. I think I'm still waiting to hear from 1 or 2 more board members.
Talking about future meetings, just kind of floating it out there. it was something we had talked about before, having in-district meetings,
Yeah.
one in the fall, one in the spring,
Yeah.
any?
So
other
we,
thoughts
yeah,
on that?
I mean, that's just been our regular pattern, and and I had talked about a pick in a month before the end of the year to do a meeting on location somewhere, so we're kind of open. What would we were talking about, what region were we talking about?
We're potentially looking at, no, I think we're actually, I think the Commissioner had a suggestion, one of the CTE centers over by,
We did last year.
Lebanon, Hanover, like somewhere, I don't know.
That was not what I
I don't know.
Somebody else suggested.
Keep in mind, I've only.
Suggested it, I don't know.
One thing I want to mention is so may or may not know, we've been painting and recarpeting throughout the entire building. This space has not been done yet, and so this space will be done, and we are also updating our AV equipment, and so we might be a good opportunity to combine a trip with when we get some of that information.
So that was kind of it. I mean, so we want to do these twice a year anyway.
Right.
But we were trying to coordinate our next trip with, we're doing this room, so we don't have to be here. So we're looking for a school to do a location meeting. I mean, it could be a CT center, like we're open to lots of possibilities. We try to hit different regions of the state. So, and we realized, I don't think we've done the Lakes region since I've been on the board. Like,
No, we did it.
we did Prospect
Prospect
Mountain.
Mountain.
Well, we did Prospect Mountain, right?
Way
I
up
guess
there.
that counts as a lake.
You know, it's not easy.
No.
Yeah, that counts.
Counts.
But it's funny, cause I think of mountain, don't
We
think of
didn't
like.
seacoast very much.
We did Oyster River Middle
Ocean-
School a few
yeah,
years ago.
yeah, Oyster River.
We've done Nashua, we've done Littleton,
Yeah,
Did all
all the regions, but,
Let's circle back.
we did Fall Mountain a long time ago, like that was probably one of the,
I mean, my general rule is I wanna hit the,
oh yeah.
sort of lakes region in North Country in October. We just coordinate it there, and then maybe the seacoast in May. Yeah, that's-
Drew, is it an administrative hassle to do the meetings on site at schools? Because it would seem like it would be really cool
It's
to
a-
have them more and more and more.
It's a little, it is and it isn't, and I think doing it twice a year is really, I think it's important that we get out there too, so.
Yeah, it's a little bit, so it puts some burden on the school, our host, right? But I think it's valuable to get out and do this, so.
No, I'm actually asking why we don't do it more. Like, because it's everything virtual, everything remote, we're all driving in, we're all.
The answer to that, the big answer to that question is Concord is central to everybody, right? It's relatively central, so, people coming from every part of the state. That's why Concord's the capital. It's easier for all of the members to get here. So if we have one end of the state, then Ken's gonna be driving forever, right? So that's kind of the issue.
Where's the largest CTE center?
I don't know the answer, which one's largest?
Still.
Just me, I don't
National.
recognize.
Yes.
I think that would be an interesting.
I mean, you have some obvious, you could guess, but I don't. But I'd love to go to a CT.
We could find one of the ones that have just been recently renovated.
There's a few, so I think, yeah, so I'll update you with what.
Out west. It's been a
That's
little
what I mean,
while.
I think that's why we talked about maybe going in that direction.
No, I mean, you're keen. I guess.
That's what I'm thinking, I think that's what we were.
It is, right, and that's why we've only been doing it twice a year, because it creates a burden on some members to drive all the way across the state.
Mhm.
Yeah, me and Phil.
And it limits entry.
Yeah, the technology is a
Well,
little
that's
challenging
actually the
depending on where we go, but the CTE center should be
So
open.
when we do a meeting, so we did a meeting at Littleton, right? Anybody who wants to come for public comment has to, that's why, like, we try to balance being in a school and hearing that feedback with, we have people who want to participate in our meetings, and it's challenging if we're driving them to the far ends of the state.
The other thing to keep in mind is when we have hearings and if the folks decide to go in non-public, we need to make sure with the school, if that they have that capability to do that, so that's also a challenge.
Yeah, but I like doing it, so. But yeah, so we'll look at some opportunities, and I think it's just trying to figure out the timing for this room.
Perhaps
and
we
then-
should ask the commissioner where she would like to go.
Yeah.
So I'm constantly throughout the state, always for this job, so I don't have a preference. I do know that Rob mentioned today that they just redid their PD center and they have a great space. He invited to us to his space. And he was talking about how he had, seamless technology now. And I think that's one of the things that makes it easier on Angela, the tech. So in the past couple of years, because of the stimulus money and, everything that's happened with technology and COVID and everything like that, the availability of technology to move meetings has vastly improved across the state, which, so.
And we tend to go to schools, not colleges,
Yeah.
so that would be an interesting.
Well, I think Rob, at his PD center, is part of his high school.
Yeah.
But no, actually also, I'm sure Plymouth State would love to host us. I know they've mentioned that before. Governor and council, so they meet every other week throughout the year, but they do at least 5 meetings on the road, one in every single region every year. And I think it would be a good opportunity for us to see the type of learning that's going on, the environments, some of the amazing things and some of the challenges that schools experience across the state.
I think every time we've done it in a school, we've learned from that administration of exactly that. Here are some of our successes, here's some of our challenges, we get that feedback.
Maybe we should go to Claremont.
That's not a bad idea. Like,
So I would just,
No,
let's not put any extra pressure on
On
them
them right now, yes.
But you can do it in their empty building.
Right, no, but we should go to Claremont at some point. Maybe not right now. But I think Keene area, somewhere
think
out that way,
that's a
we haven't hit that in a long time, I
As
think.
long as it's not snowing.
Well, that's the other consideration is, we don't wanna wait if we're going
Right.
We had that,
north.
Woodsville one a couple
Yeah.
years ago and it was a blizzard.
Yeah,
Yeah, like governor and council goes on the road in the summer, but we can't really do that into the schools if we want to be there. So it's kind of it is.
yeah, so do we have a sense of?
So we did the walkthrough with the AV yesterday, so it looks like maybe even as early as November. They could, but I don't, the AV part of it, but I don't know about the carpeting and the painting is a little different, so I don't know where.
Yeah, well, as soon as you get a schedule, let me know.
So November or
because
December?
November would be preferable just for weather's sake, but if it has to be, like, we don't have to schedule it like a really far drive.
No.
If we wanna just protect the weather, so, there are opportunities.
You can do the western part of the state, not on the western border, just.
Exactly, we can look for opportunities that don't create too much of a travel burden.
We'll look into it.
Okay, I think we're up on our 30 minutes for our meeting. So I'm gonna close that, which leaves us at the end of our meeting before lunch. So how about that?
So,
Anybody, any other open board discussion? So I just want to throw out, I know we've briefly touched on the NAEP scores, the national NAEP scores, which just came out, and it's not good, and it's a national thing. And I think when you look at the trends, and I haven't gone through a fully deep dive on this this week, but when you look at the NAEP score trends nationally, and if you pull up the separate states, they also follow this trend. And nobody has an answer for this, but the NAEP scores frankly have never been great since they've started NAEP. But we've seen, the trend was basically, generally speaking, that great, we were going up a little bit, up in the 90s and early 2000s, and then 2013 and 2015. Just crater nationwide. And we've been going down since then. COVID made it worse, but the downward trends have been about a decade long now. And it's just something I think that everybody who's in public education has to really now. This latest report solidifies the fact that this is a serious problem. And like they were saying, like Rob was saying about making it part of a holistic conversation. Actually, it was the Keene State people, Plymouth State people, talking about their enrollment decline. You can't just fiddle around the edges anymore. You have to really take on a reorganization there. And I think we've got enough test score data at a national level, and this applies to us in New Hampshire as well as everywhere else, to start looking at this as a structural problem. Like there's something in here, we can't just be saying, I'm gonna tinker around the edges on this.
I wish we had a crystal ball and we could look at SAU 29
Mhm.
today and look at SA 29 in 5 years and see what their philosophy of encouraging kids to have ownership of their education in a really tangible way. if that will be reflected in what their scores
Yeah,
are.
actually, you may have some very interesting, right now I'm working on a project with the University of Ehime in South Japan, where we want to train college students in innovation, design, all those things. And they go teach in schools around, so that more school kids get excited about STEM and they want to come to college. And we want to start this virtuous cycle from down at the bottom. So I'll be joining as a visiting professor there and to start up this whole research work almost next month. I truly believe that this is the time. Japan is already seeing this problem seriously because of the lower birth rates and higher age and all those things, and decline in GDP. So we are trying to create this program and maybe scale it across the country. And I'm actually, next week I'm talking about it. I'd like to send MIT alumni club is organizing a talk on my work, and I'll send out the Zoom link on 18th evening.
And so one reason I'm so glad you're on the board is because you have, you're delving into the research on this kind of stuff, and you're giving us a great perspective. And I think you and I have talked about this before, but, you know, just looking at what are the colleges of education, how are they teaching the teachers? What are they teaching them? What are the methods? What are they, you know, you and I have talked a lot about hands-on learning, and I know we get very excited about it because we can see this in a lot of kids' lives. And, you know, the idea that if we're training everybody to teach to lecture to a classroom, when kids learn better with hands-on instruction, then we have a lot of research showing that kids learn better with hands-on instruction. So to what degree can we facilitate that transition in our schools? You know, this is really important stuff, but I think we've just sort of allowed to flow in this kind of natural way and have things filter down from the academy, and then it takes time to process through. And I think we look at these test scores and realize that we can't just passively wait for this stuff.
But
Our education system currently is a teaching system, not a learning system.
Right.
Okay, so there's a whole process we're continuing for the past 2 centuries. And industry is looking for people with a very different kind of skill sets and mindset. And these are 2 different silos. One is not feeding the next. And so we need to kind of bring together what the industry wants. And that is not trigonometry and history and things, but it is actually how to learn on their own, but ability to learn.
Right? But and even, you know, this is the thing that when you look at some of the academic research on college level instruction, you know, even in the humanities, kids learn better when they have projects that they work on other than sitting on this. And I mean, the data on this is massive at this point. And yet our whole system is still designed to have them talk, you know, in this way that doesn't tend to work as well as other ways. So
is it also not likely that this is an organic problem, that test taking with no connection to outcome, that outcome has no direct correlation to your opportunity if kids aren't invested? And you look at the New York system, or the Regent system, where kids, I mean, I remember living in Connecticut, and just my neighbor to the west and north, these kids all had to take all these exams. I found it frightening.
Yeah.
But there was a consequence for not doing well on these tests. So I look at this and wonder, is it more of an organic problem where kids, yeah, why invest in this test? It doesn't mean anything.
It actually, by study shows that kids, they're born as exploratory learners. Leave a kid here, she's going to go try out all kinds of things, you know, like there is a learning process. Our curriculum-driven education slowly starts to make them think on a groove. Think, you know, blinders, we're putting them into that to see, okay, you only need to study because that's what's coming for exam. And they start to lose the confidence in their own ability to learn. And at about mid-teens, about 13, 14, you start to lose confidence. And it is very, very difficult to bring it back after.
Well,
A kid who is in 11th grade who says that I can't learn math, even though she had exactly the abilities as anyone else. It's primarily, we do this injustice to girls more than boys. Saying, you know, the moment she says math is hard, you give her a pass, saying, oh, that is okay. It is not okay. You can learn just as much as anyone else. And once you lose the confidence, it's very, very difficult to tell them that, yes, you can do all these things. So this has to start at middle school or earlier.
Or
to
earlier.
build them learning
But you
confidence.
see this in the NAEP, so just to use the NAEP course as an example. The percentages proficient or even above basic aren't great at any grade level. But they're higher in fourth grade and eighth grade. And the longer you stay in the system, the lower they get, to the point that this last result, 22% of US 12th graders are proficient in math. 22%. That's, I don't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head, but I think it was in the 40s for fourth graders, right? So we're losing over those 8 years. You take 40, so if you cut the percent proficient in about half, it should go the other way around. The more time you spend in the system, the better you should get at it. So obviously, we're doing something wrong on a massive scale nationwide.
This is where I would love to contribute,
Yeah.
because we are primarily talking about yesterday's problems.
Yeah.
Or today's issues. We are not talking enough about what we need to do in future.
Yeah, and it goes back to what I was trying to get the point with Commissioner Davis about, hopefully we can find a way to survey students. There have been some academics that have done surveys of students to test student engagement. And there's a huge gulf between what parents think kids are doing in school and how valuable the parents think the school is versus the kids. So you'll have 65% of parents say, my kid loves school. And 40% of kids, 10th graders, say they love school. You'll have 70-some% of parents say, yeah, my kid's getting valuable stuff happening in school. And about 40% of the 10th graders say, yeah, it's a valuable use of my time. And when you can't even get half of 10th graders to say that their learning is valuable, that their time spent in school is valuable, that's a colossal problem. That's just not a little thing, that's a massive problem. And that's where I sort of get to, and Steve Appleby, to give him credit, we were having conversation about these NAEP numbers the other day. And, his formulation was, again, yes, phones are a distraction. Yes, we know that kids raised on phones have these other problems that they can bring into the school system and all that. But if you're not engaging the kids, and the classroom instruction is boring, they start to look for distractions. And so they're turning to their phones. We know this from survey data at the national level, probably because they're bored to death in class. And that should not be happening. So there's a massive structural problem here. And I get it. Like, if I were a teacher, I would want to have those distractions in class, and we should take them out. But once we do that, we still have to address the issue of, are we engaging kids?
The second thing is, we talked about college admissions.
Yeah.
Kids are not going to college.
Mhm.
Okay, higher education admissions have dropped. The problem is not in college, problems in early school.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is all combined. So even the research that I'm doing is primarily, how do you increase the number of kids going to college?
Mhm.
Once it increases, then everything else downstream up changes,
Right.
So the critical point is the school to college transition. Even school itself.
Yeah. And we thought, I remember these conversations in the 90s and early 2000s where we thought we were creating this pipeline. We were going to be sending all these kids to college. And even though the demographics are what they are, we were going to get massively higher percentages of our high school graduates going to college. And that hasn't really happened, right? We hit this plateau where we could be sending 60-70% of our high school graduates to college, but we're not. So they see a disconnect there. Like, they don't see the value in going. So
even the
that's a
colleges
problem.
have the same problem the schools have.
Yeah.
They also haven't adopted for the industry, today's industry. The colleges haven't changed the process of teaching either. So it's a system-wide change that need to.
Every time we've had CTE Center people present to the board, or even VOTEC people present to the board in a public school district, every time they have said, we reached out to our local business community and we went to our manufacturers, we went to our employers, and we sit down with them and we asked them, what do you need? What are the skills that you need? And there was always a disconnect between what the employers said they wanted and what the district was focusing on every time. And they tried to address that to their credit, and that's why they were presenting to us. But when we've had local manufacturers testify before us, they've said, I need soft skills. Yeah, I need the math. You guys need to get better at math instruction. I need science instruction to be better, but critical thinking, but also these soft skills, like I need that kind of stuff too. And I mean, this has been a consistent problem, a disconnect between what employers want and what the district is doing.
So I think there's a three-legged stool though too, right? And I think that's Ann's point, which is like, what I would hear locally, when there was like a lot of questions like, why are the scores so low? It's the, like, you get a lot of like, where kids invested in taking the test. Like they just sit there and they're not trying hard, they're not, which gets to me like kids' interest in what's going on, what employers need, what schools are offering. There's like a three-legged stool to get like those outcomes. Now the test even measuring right outcomes.
Well, you know, so there's definitely some, you sort of wonder, okay, if the kids are told this test isn't reflect, it isn't, there are no consequences for what your performance has on a NAEP test, right? They know that. So maybe they're not performing as well, but you're still not gonna see this gap, right? And this constant decline in scores, you know, for 10 years. So even if you discount the effort that some of these kids are putting in, that doesn't explain why we've had such a big drop in scores. And it's deeply concerning.
I think this may have been one of the most productive discussions on this topic.
Yeah.
The year that I've been here.
Yeah.
So I'd love to see how do we take up from here.
Yeah.
So I think what is the role of this board and what can we do to actually influence it? Because we're limited by statute.
Well, but we are, yeah, and look, we have. Okay, but we have certain authority, like, so we, you know, we oversee the PEP programs. Like, we should be having more serious conversations with these PEP programs about how they're training educators. You know, I don't think we've had, it's complex, it's complicated. And we're lay people, so we sort of take what they tell us and say, okay, well, we've through these courses stuff, but I think we need to be having more serious, deeper conversations about how they're training educators and what, you know, methods they're using, what are they training educators to do, how much are they prepared to teach hands-on, you know, these kinds of things are really critical, and I don't think we've had those conversations as much as we should have.
The teacher is like the sage on stage model is so ancient. It's more like guide on the side or something like that, because they call it. So it's not that you need to know everything to teach, but you know, how do you inspire them to learn is the most critical part.
But I don't think it's, I think districts, or not every district is doing stage on stage. I think there's a whole bunch of variety of things that are happening, which also begs the question for me, how do we dig district by district, like get real down in the data and be like, hey, what's working? Where are the things that are working and how do we?
Yeah, and there's definitely some districts that are doing things better than some other districts. So, you know, I think part of our role should be reaching out to some of those folks more than just our little, you know, half-hour presentations, to find some of the districts that have had success improving their student growth.
Yeah.
And we had some schools that had huge increases in growth. I mean, just from some of the data that I have here, so Dunstable School in Nashua increased 31% from 41 to 72% proficiency. Newmark Junior High School from 54 to 69.
Gigantic.
Yeah, so sorry, so the first one, so Dunstable was science, Lincoln Street in Exeter was 48 to 62% in science, Northampton, 60 to 74% in science, and then I should probably read it.
Can we get
chronological?
get them to tell us what they do?
Yeah, so
bring them in and have them present to
yeah,
us.
so I think this is a great opportunity. Chester, in math, they went from 39 to 60%. That's huge. So we have some great schools and we would like to highlight
Yeah.
that and start doing some of that work.
If we can codify it, if they did these kind of things, okay, then at least put together a list of recommendations that others can adopt and, you know.
Yeah, so I mean, so Chester Academy, so it says recognizing the need for change, we received our SAS preliminary results in 23-24 school year. We immediately began to dig deeper into the data to determine where the strengths and weaknesses were and what we could do to address that. As a result, we customized our scope and sequence of our math instruction to using for our core resource, engage the targeted professional development so our teachers could implement daily math number talks and focus on using New Hampshire SAS modulars to inform our instruction and monitor student growth for the 24-25 school year, said the principal. We look forward to continuing this growth, further strengthen our, and improving what we do. So we have a couple, I mean, we have a couple great examples of this, and as we've continued to grow and improve our assessment team within the department, we are able to do more of this work.
I'm on the board of New Hampshire Tech Alliance, you know, the high-tech group of, with so many industries in there. And I've been suggesting to them to how do you train people for becoming next entrepreneurs. And they do a lot of promotional entrepreneurship and such. And things that need to come together. One is Tech Alliance as a center with schools, the universities, you know, government policy, investors, industry. If we can actually at least have a discussion between all of them, we can actually create a program where school kids can get some internships here and there, exposure to things, and train them from very early on. And which will change the number of kids who are going to stay back and stay in state and take up a job, start a company. Currently, anyone who's kind of highly qualified, they go to Silicon Valley or somewhere else, you know, and kind of leaving the state in a hole all the time. So how do you create more entrepreneurship within the state to create jobs and wealth here? I think bringing all the few players together and we even start the discussion would be wonderful.
Yeah, I like, if you, I'm happy to do it, I'm able to do it, if you want to reach out to, you know, some of these schools with the big gains and just say, hey, can you guys schedule a time that which board meeting date would work for you to come make us a presentation? Because I want to know if what's working. And then to the extent that the department can facilitate these success stories. And, you know, a 1-year jump is great. I'm going to see if that can be sustained over many years, because sometimes we'll see a big jump and then it doesn't hold. But the other thing that I want to suggest to you guys, so there are states that have made big turnarounds too. Mississippi is one that has had a gigantic turnaround in their reading scores. They went from last place in the country to beating a whole bunch of other states on reading assessment because they figured out that they were instructing kids wrong in reading, and they adopted the science of reading, and they did some major changes in their instruction. And Mississippi, they call it Mississippi Miracle now. It's a gigantic change in reading performance and outcomes, and it's been sustained over time. So I was going to ask somebody from their Department of Ed to do a Zoom talk to us about how they did that, what best practices can they share, are there things that we could do statewide to facilitate? Because we have had school districts do a similar sort of thing, realize our reading instruction is wrong, they made these changes and they had gains here in New Hampshire, but I'd love to hear from the statewide level how they did that.
Caitlin, I'm curious about those improvements. Were they all in the same age cohorts or were they all over the?
We did it by subject. This is elementary school. I don't have this, if the Memorial School here is. Stratham Memorial School, is that the middle school or is that the elementary school? I can certainly, so the assessment data
Where it's
is
happening.
Yeah, we can definitely do more of that. To your comment as far as Mississippi, the other state we should definitely pay attention to is Alabama and what they've done with math.
Yep, exactly.
Eric McKay, the state superintendent down there, has really prioritized math. He's done a whole system improvement. He's looked at, you know, the academic standards, their assessments, their master professional development plans. He's looked at their teacher prep programs.
Yeah.
The goals and visions of the State Board of Education have been aligned around it.
Great.
And so it's been a whole system movement. And so, you know, that's kind of things we want to see.
Well, I'll reach out to both of them and see if we can schedule some Zoom meetings, because when you see a state that had massive jumps in outcomes and they're kind of sustained over time, you want to learn from them. So,
and reading is crucial. Like, you can't even get to the math word problems on reading, but that when I look at our data and have over my tenure thus far here, math, I feel like is the one that has caught my attention. So-
Yeah, no, so we have, our biggest problem is math in New Hampshire, when you look at the scores across the board, but we still struggle with reading. Like,
Yeah.
we still have, and I talked to the previous commissioner about this, he had presented on this sort of science of reading. So if you remember those two teachers who came
Yes.
to us with their comic books, right?
Yeah.
We've had this conversation and they were telling us, well, a lot of teachers in New Hampshire still teach kids, use improper methods and, methods that don't work because they were taught that way in college. And so we have districts that have figured it out, but we also have districts where, they're still using the methods that don't work.
In our teacher prep programs, what are they using?
Well, and so that's part of the problem, is, and that's why I think we need to talk more seriously to our. Yeah, it's-
Every piece has to be working together,
Exactly.
and we've been too siloed in methods. Even within
Exactly.
the Department of Education, we've been too siloed, and that's definitely one of my goals, is to kind of work that together,
Oh,
so.
And you mentioned goals and visions that they have, in, was it Mississippi or was it Alabama?
Oh, yeah, Mississippi for.
So maybe it's time for us to establish, at least begin having goals and visions.
Well, so, yeah, so we have over time, and we haven't really taken that on, at the board level. They've done that in the past. I'd like to, that's definitely something we should think about. And I think it sort of starts with reaching out to New Hampshire districts and schools there, finding out what works. Reaching out to other states and seeing what they've done. And to the extent that we can facilitate some regulatory changes or policy aspirations at the board level, I'm all for it.
There's a foundational question that just keeps eating at me. Everything we're talking about, I totally agree with. Best practice is trying to find ways to get the scores up and get everything moving up. But historically, if we were here and things have been dropping to here, what is different that caused that in our best guess? And B, what were we doing here that we're not doing still? I mean, are there things here that we were doing that made an impact that worked? And are we trying to get either back to that? I mean, are we trying to reinvent the wheel when the wheel was created here?
So, but to your point, so here, so let's just say we're here now when we're here.
Yeah.
Here was never good. Like, so we were never up here. Like, if you're looking at our NAEP scores.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking it going from the 40s to the 30s. Like,
Okay, so it's never.
it was never great. Like, we were
Okay.
never. And even on our state test scores, like when you look at our state assessment tests, you know. When you look at our NAEP scores, our SAT, our state assessments, and you look nationally, New Hampshire's always in the top, say 6. But that's kind of grading on a curve because everybody else is doing very poorly. We're doing better than most other states, but we still struggle to get half of our kids proficient in lots of different subjects, in lots of different grade levels. So I don't think we can continue to accept below 50% proficient at all. But even if we're getting 52, 53, 54% of kids proficient in subjects, that's not okay either.
I guess my question is, what is, and I know there's no one cause, but what's the quick answer to why did we go down?
Well, nobody knows. Like, so I've been reading a lot of.
Yeah, because that's important.
So
One of the reasons is, unlike in some of the, many of the developing countries, the hunger is gone. There's, like, in there it's a survival, you need to study to survive. There's this, there's
That's a
parents
really
pushing,
point.
and you, otherwise you can't get there, and we are way more comfortable.
That's a really interesting point, right? Because if the kids feel like, I don't have to work too hard and I'll still be fine. I'll still be able to play video games and have a part-time job and like, I'm not gonna starve. Your motivation's not as strong as if you really, you're a first generation college kid from a low income country, like, you wanna aspire to that. There's a different, but I do think that's a very important point. But that decline in our NAEP score since 2013, people are still trying to figure that out. I mean, a lot of people attribute it to cell phones because the iPhone came out in 2008. It wasn't until about 2012, 2010 when you started to get large scale adoption. I think there's definitely something to that, but I think we can overemphasize that. I think it's probably much more, a much bigger, more systemic problem. But, you know, when we had superintendents come in here and talk to us and stuff, and to your point, Caitlin was making about these schools that figured out they were doing stuff wrong. And then they had a massive jump in their scores. You know, just one example, you know, when we talked to the Manchester superintendent, when the new superintendent, Jennifer, when she took over, I was talking to her, and one of the things that she discovered when she became superintendent, she had been in the system as an administrator, was that they weren't aligned, their math curriculum weren't aligned from grade level to grade level. In the biggest district in the state. That's insane. But that had been going on for years and nobody had caught them. Well, that's a structural issue, like nothing, and they're required to align it, right? We say you have to align your curriculum and they weren't doing it. So, you know, there are problems in execution, right, at the district level. And if it gets cut back, kind of our point about the business discussion. So if the superintendent doesn't know, or the assistant superintendent doesn't know that the math curriculum is not aligned, the school board doesn't know, that all the rules in place say you gotta align it. But if nobody's following the rules, well, it's like the business administrator. Well, the business administrator is required to do all these things, but if they just don't do it, and nobody in the superintendent's office or the school board is checking on them, and it just doesn't get done. It's sort of the same thing with curriculum. And if you don't have a coordinator that's doing their job right and all this stuff, then things just won't work and nobody knows why.
Yeah, it's a systems issue.
It's a leadership issue.
Despite the desire for it, we get it, like a silver bullet, like what is the one thing that's really changed? I think.
Well, I believe in checks and balances.
One thing, so the landscape of the world has changed since 2013. Like, I think there's a lot to be studied, probably a million dissertations to be written out there to help inform like how we can systemically address some of these challenges.
One thing I'd like to, I know Mark's in the background here and we've been trying to get coffee. One of the things that I think we should talk about is, you know, how can the state board through our powers, our rulemaking powers, you know, how can we help districts create those accountabilities? Because we have we have rules in place. We have lots and lots of rules. We have way more rules than any superintendent can memorize. Like, and so it's not a lack of rule writing. They're supposed to align this and do this and check that, and we've got all these regulations that are designed to make the system work. And if it's not working, I think we as the rulemaker, right, need to be getting that feedback from the districts and saying, okay, how can we help you?
Basically, what you're saying, you're restricting them a lot. So innovation, there's no room for innovation.
Well, so, and that's kind of my question that I want to hear from superintendents and school boards about is, so we have a lot of rules that are designed to make everything uniform statewide. We're designed to make everybody do the same things on the same pathway, but all of our rules are input based. They're all about inputs. Your staff have to have these credentials. You have to monitor this. You have to have these inputs. We don't have rules on outcomes. We don't say like, so if you don't get 50% of your kids proficient in math and reading, here are the consequences. Here's like, there's no, like what is.
We are starting to take on that work as far as the accountability for adequate education at the department. We were allowed to form a task force with some legislation we had requested about a year ago. That task force just started meeting over the summer. I think we have another meeting next week, I think. And so that's all. So it's about the performance-based accountability system, specifically around aligned to an adequate education.
Yeah.
But that's a small piece of it, and we need to expand it beyond that.
Yeah, I love that direction. Yeah. Because ultimately, we have one tool, our rules, right? Like, and that is like assuming that a carpenter only has a hammer. And every problem is unique. There's some similarities, but also unique to the circumstances of that district and that grade level and that and when we start saying everything has to be done this way, it's assuming that every problem is going to look the same, as opposed to like accountability-based rules that like allow space for people to like tailor them to the needs of the peculiarities of their district.
Now, the Marine Corps, they have this concept of, they say this is how we should work, but the end goal is what the mission is.
Yeah, exactly.
So then you do what you have to do with, given your own little conditions or your own little situation, you may have to take a different path. But as you said, we control on input. Actually, what we're really interested in is the output.
Exactly.
And we believe we know the system, how it works. Actually, how do we, control around the output rather than
So that's exactly the conversation that we've had here over the years. I know the previous commissioner had done that, and the current commissioner's looking at these outcomes versus inputs. But I think we as a state board, and we have had these discussions, and we've tried to work some of this stuff into the 306s. We've tried to work it into other rules, looking at how can we facilitate this switch to focus more on the outcomes than the inputs. You do have to have some parameters around inputs, but that's a conversation I think we need to take on much more seriously now. So we have innovation schools, which we passed a few years ago, which we have not enough school districts are doing this, but they have to come to us and request, here are all the regulations that you guys impose on us. Can we please have those waived so we can innovate? I like that we've done that, and that was a huge first step, but I'd like to have some more conversations about, can we create some permission structures where you don't even have to come and ask? Like, how can we facilitate some outcomes-based innovation, outcomes-focused innovation? Because we want to encourage these districts to be innovative and be flexible and not come ask for permission for every single thing if they have evidence-based reasons why they think it'll work. So those are bigger conversations. We have spent a century building rules based on inputs. And I'm not sure that's the best way to go about this.
To Phil's point, back to serving on the Oyster River School Board, we had 2 elementary schools and they both had their strengths. However, when the kids funneled into 5th grade, it was clear which kids had a strong math background and which had a strong language arts background. And they arrived and the 5th grade teachers all had to take these kids and continue moving them through the pipeline, even though none of them came with the same skills in a district. So there was no alignment at the elementary level, what the kids, when they left elementary school and entered 5th grade, arrived with. And so to your point, our rules are there as a support, as a guideline, as an insurance policy.
Yeah.
But if it does hamper innovation and creativity, because I look at these 2 elementary schools, they did a beautiful job at what they did beautifully, but they failed the kids in what they didn't teach.
Yeah, and I think we've sort of heard so often districts that have that issue, whether it's one grade's better than the next, or whether it's within a school, things not being aligned, and education is getting that structure is hard and it's challenging, and it's not, I don't want to suggest that it's easy, but we should be thinking more
But
about.
without the foundation, they're not in a position to do the aspiring things.
Right, if you have the 5th grade teacher who has to,
Like
catch these kids up.
was a
It's
huge problem.
It's a struggle. But I think I'd like to see us have more of these conversations about how can we look at outcomes, how can we talk to the teacher pet programs and say, look, because they respond to our regulations too, right? So they're teaching what we have told them to teach, like the state board for a century has told them to teach. And so we have a role to play there in saying, okay, we need the teachers to come out with these skills. We need to reassess what we're asking them to teach in the first place. And so that's a big
And we
conversation.
learn that from the schools that are a success in either language arts or in math, and potentially champion those approaches.
I'd like to suggest to Drew and Kathleen, if you can say, let's have a working group, even starting to talk about it, and see what can be brought out, just have a line of discussion on this. We are already well behind the line.
Yeah.
We are way behind the problem right now. We need to have a lot of catch up to do. But every single year that we lose, it may take another 5 years to catch up.
Right, I mean, we lose a direct cohort of students, right, and it's troubling. Gee, I wonder, can you think of anybody who'd like to spearhead a working group, Raj? Yeah.
You have to start it. I would love to help with that.
No, but we should, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
It's too important, and I feel like we've been tinkering around the edges at the board level here for a while, and, you know, I don't know that we need to keep doing it that way. So I'd love to be empowering districts to be much more innovative and help, and, you know, helping them. If we can be, district can be more of a clearinghouse to give them information on data. I mean, the US Department of Education does that, the state does that. How much of that is getting through? So, lots of stuff to talk about.
So, see, we make rules for the exception case rather than the primary case. So like, you know, everybody takes off your shoes when you go to a plane because one guy did that long back, you know. So every rule is created primarily because of what should not go wrong instead of what could go right.
Yeah, and I think
how
that's
do
a
we
great,
make them so that they can actually
Right.
have, when they meet all the extreme rules, they're spending a lot of money and time trying to meet the rule, which is kind of
I mean,
superfluous.
that's right, but a lot of our rules, we hear this when we're discussing, the 306s was a great example, like a lot of the rules that we are imposing on districts are designed to, out of fear.
Okay.
Right? It's fear that the district won't do this, local school board won't meet these minimum requirements if we don't order them to.
Exception,
So we
yeah.
create a whole structure around the fear of having that outlier district that says, I don't care about my kids, right? Or I'm gonna cut corners here. So we impose all these rules on them, and it's not to say that you shouldn't have some parameters.
Outcome-based measurement will do to solve the problem.
Right, exactly. And so how can we shift our thinking towards focusing on, we expect you to reach these results, right? We empower you to find the best ways to reach these results. There are certain, so we have adequate education statutes, we have rules that we have to set around what they have to offer, you know, but, and that's all good. But if we can find a way to shift the focus more to, spurring them to get the results, rather than saying, as long as you have checked the box on all these rules, then you're a good school, like you're adequate, you're doing your job. Like, I don't,
adequate education here, we're like 20% proficiency and
Exactly.
everything, they're still, but they're doing all the right things.
it's all like the 20th century, so much of our regulations since the board was created a century ago are based on box checking. You know, and that's what we do with the pet program. So we do these reviews and the teams come to us and say they've checked all these boxes, it's a good pet program. And the districts have checked all these boxes, you know, so the kids are getting an adequate education because they've checked off all these boxes. And yet, you know, 30% of our kids are proficient in math, so.
That is the primary outcome we want, better proficiency.
Exactly, right, so thinking about the way we as a board can facilitate, you know, the legislature needs to do its job. But if we can facilitate some sort of mindset change here of helping the districts focus on outcomes, rather than just checking boxes, would be huge.
Yeah, even if you pick a couple of districts and say, okay, test it out, open up some of those things and say, see how they change. And innovative would be innovative too, and then you can use, you know, if you're scared of opening up for all the districts because some of them just do some of them and then learn from that and.
So, but I think we get back to what is the legislative authority of this board?
Yeah.
And
Oh,
like,
okay.
you're suggesting things that I think are
Maybe.
outside of what are, but like, it's not saying that we couldn't find ways to work with the department and collaborate across lines.
Well, we have certain statutory,
Yeah.
Interestingly though, so I would happen to be reading through the statutes the other day, just
Casually reading
because
statute.
what you do. See if I can call up the actual statute.
It's 187.
Well, there's one, let me find it, it's 189.
What are you doing? Fidgeting, but I got get used to it, I always do. Paper clips are not ever safe with me.
Oh my gosh, you and my 13-year-old, like,
Perfect.
if there's anything within his grasp at the dinner table, it's the time. We have to clear the whole space.
Yeah, but I mean, and I think, to Phil, what you said is, how can we support the schools and work that they're doing? I think there's, we are limited, well, you are limited as a board, and even at the department, we're oftentimes limited. But there is certainly opportunity for us to support and encourage, innovation.
Yeah.
And I think we could talk about how do we do that better?
I would redefine the relationship,
Right.
like, so that it's not just like, follow these rules, or
Right.
you're in trouble.
And I think that it's taken us as a board, because the legislature says all of our rules expire every 10 years, right? And when I got on the board, like, the department didn't even have a system for finding out when the rules were expiring. So we were constantly playing catch up with all these expired rules. So the department created a system. We have a much better grasp on all when the rules will expire. We're doing this, but you guys know, most of our work at this board is revising rule expiration, right? And rather than taking a holistic look at, hey, wait a minute, how are we even, like, what's our goal here for regulating? We're just updating this rule, that rule, that rule. So it's put us on this conveyor belt of updating rules discreetly, one little rule at a time, rather than taking a big picture look. So, we had the innovation schools, which was passed in 2021, I think. This is a statute from 1919, which is the year the board was created. It was last updated in 1921. So it gives you an example of what the legislature was thinking a century ago about the board, right? This is 189.3 under its other modifications. I had forgotten about this, Robin, because I went back and I was reading through, and it's really amazing. It actually empowers us to, in reason of unusual circumstances or exceptional conditions in a particular school district, we are allowed to suspend or modify any obligations that we find unreasonable, including statutes. So if any other provision in the laws which relate to the education shall be found by the state board to impose upon any district obligations which are reasons of unusual circumstances or exceptional conditions in that district. So that means we can't do a blanket one for the whole state, right? But Claremont is a perfect example,
Oh my
right?
goodness.
So now maybe nothing applies there, but I'm just sort of reading through the legal authority here. It says we could suspend statutes.
I mean, so that would be sitting like, we could suspend class size for this statute for Claremont, because it's like, oh, wow, they have to like consolidate,
Sure.
to like make the.
But if the district came to us and said, look, here's some statutes and some rules that you guys write that are imposing an undue financial burden on us. Because of these extenuating circumstances, it can't be just your general run of the mill everyday thing. The state board is actually empowered to suspend statutes.
Temporarily?
It's suspend, yeah, well, suspend would mean temporary, right? So
Yeah.
suspend or modify.
So we could suspend school year, we could suspend hours of instruction, we could suspend.
Obviously, it's not something that is frequently used. Maybe it's never been used, but it's a century old. So, anyway, my point in bringing this statute up was not to say, let's go hunt for reasons to do this.
Yeah.
It is that the legislators who created the state board anticipated that rulemaking and statutory obligations on districts could be burdened.
So be overreached.
And would need to be suspended from time to time. So that indicates to me that they contemplated that there can be that, and clearly, we're not allowed to do an unfunded mandate, right? So clearly they understood that you can impose too many rules and regulations that would prevent districts from, that would cause them to spend money unnecessarily, because some of this is related to spending.
And even tolerance. So then some of the rules, we keep adding to rules. We don't often go back and, I think Windows, it only about 10 years back, the Spanish war tax was taken out. Isn't it?
I know, I think it still is.
I don't know if it is. So we keep adding to rules, but we never take it out. Question is, we just heard about bringing down the number of forms from 18 to 8.
So we've done that.
That's an efficiency in our side. I think we should give the same efficiency.
No, so we do, in fact, this board, and we've worked with staff to streamline our rules. So every time we get one of those rules that come up, the staff understands, and I try to work the language of it to shrink it. even if it's just just streamlining the wording, I mean, that's one thing, but, finding ways to, reduce the regulatory burden is something we have been doing for years here, and to the extent that, we can. So we have been looking at it, but I think we need to take but it's been piece by piece, it's been gradual. So I think it's time to take a bigger, more comprehensive look at what are we really doing here? What are we getting out of this result? Are we getting the best? Are we empowering districts to do their best work, right? I mean, that should really be our rule writing job. We're giving you guys the tools and the structure to do your best work.
Well, we're
I don't think we're doing
educators to do their best work.
Right, exactly.
So what burdens are you putting on educators that are just superfluous and,
Right.
and.
Well, we had this
archaic?
discussion with charter schools. So one of the things we've been doing in the department over the last couple of years is sort of going through our charter school statutes and also our rules. And we found that both in statute and rule, we've been requiring them to do massive amounts of paperwork that really isn't productive, right? So, we're gonna be talking to legislators about streamlining the charter school legislation and then streamlining our rules to follow that, to be focused on outcomes, results, and not just box checking. So if we can do that for charter schools, we can certainly do it for districts as well to help them better educate kids. I mean, that's what we all want.
I think of these superintendents as entrepreneurs who may need to bring in new innovation and learning and education.
But rules don't take on that
At all.
And that's the
That's
problem.
not how the system is
No,
structured.
but when then you throw in all these kind of things that they have to meet for almost for no productive reason. You're taking away their time, effort, all these kind of focus. And then, of course, finally, you don't have the outcome we want, but they have met all the rules. Doesn't help either of us, the students or us. Yeah.
And I like that idea of thinking of superintendents as empowering them to be more entrepreneurial in their approach, but our rules don't really do that. They're not designed to do that. And
Do we have the
we're making some changes there and heading in that direction, but not really large ones. So I think that's where those conversations, we're gonna reach out to you guys.
Yeah, can I just add something?
Yeah, please do. So if
Thank
you wanna
you.
come up and just, so
Oh, sure.
the note taker can get your name on the record.
Probably needs it toward the middle. Mark McLean, I'm the executive director of the New Hampshire School Administrators Association, and thank you for the conversation. It's great. I do think that there's a bit of disparity in assessing the outcomes via standardized test scores that are designed to assess the current system and using that as a way to spur improvement.
Sure.
And it has to be with support, and the entrepreneurial spirit, I think, is really important. Identifying collaboration opportunities, and as you all know, we've over the past couple of years really tried to showcase and uplift some of the great things that are happening. And I just want to put that out there as a reminder about all the good things that are happening. So when you hear about engagement and things like that, just kind of remember the good things that are happening and that we're attempting to showcase. And I've heard people talk about that. It really is happening throughout the state, and it's really important. But to use NAEP scores and to use standardized test scores as a way to measure an entrepreneurial system, it doesn't measure mindsets, it doesn't measure engagement, it doesn't measure passion. That's going to be a tough needle to thread. So I just want to remind people about that.
So like, not to keep harping on my local time, but like one of the things I was trying to focus on locally was what is a holistic measurement? Because we keep looking at test scores, but what is a holistic measurement? Because we established a vision of a graduate. Like, how do we measure the other aspects of it? And it was really hard to get like, well, activity in clubs and activity in social, that's just activity. That's not productivity. Right? So trying to get like, what are we producing?
Yeah, so, and I hear you about test scores, they're one tool, but they're an important tool.
Yeah.
But I think, so one of the things that maybe we can talk to the department about, and I know the iPlatform stuff has a lot of data in there that we could look at. So there are other outcomes you could look at. So you can look at test scores, which are really important, because we need to know that these kids are learning things academically, but so how many kids have a job 1 or 2 years out of high school? How many are in college? What's the, so there are success measures that aren't test score related that we can also look at. And those can give us some information as well. So, like one thing I do think, I know the legislature is pass some laws about what kids can be surveyed and that kind of stuff, but I do think we don't often hear from the students enough about their experiences, what they feel like they're getting or not getting out of school, how they think it could be better. I'd like to have that feedback as well, but I'd love to talk to you guys about what you think the outcome measure should be and how we can help you be more innovative and address that stuff. 'Cause that would be-
We sponsor an innovations conference every single year. In fact, it's a 2-day conference. One of the days is completely student-led, where students come and present to administrators across the state, the system leaders and school leaders across the state about the innovative things they're doing and leading in their schools. And it's been a huge hit. It's something that just began to happen 2 years ago. So, you know, we're making great strides with that, and it's really, it's important work. But, you know, when it comes to test scores, there's all sorts of research about what test scores are measuring, whether it's poverty, whether it's how often parents read to their children when they were growing up. Like, there's all sorts of contextual supporting data and research that is connected to standardized test scores. And I don't want to off-put those as not important, but it's important that the context is part of the conversation. You know, I would say that really reestablishing and reaffirming partnerships with families, with business and industry is primary, because that way you are creating a system that allows you to innovate. And you're right, innovating within a mountain of rules is really hard to do. And just think about the impact of the cell phone ban right now on schools. If you're chasing cell phones, and I agree, I think removing distractions is important. And I brought my cell phone up here with me because I use it as a productivity tool.
Yeah.
And I have the emotional maturity to use it as a productivity tool. But just that is going to encumber so much time. And that when you're encumbering that time, it's hard to innovate, because what you're trying to do is ensure that it's not impacting culture, it's not impacting orderly operations. And just recognizing that, I think, is extremely important. And one of the things that you've done here through the conversation is you've really identified the challenges of system level leadership. System level leadership is not easy. It's highly nuanced. Business administration is not easy. It's incredibly nuanced. And boards sign off on manifest and journal entries. There's, you know, there are checks and balances in place, but girding all of that is trust and the access to professional training, professional learning. So, you know, it's in a supportive system where everyone, and Caitlin talked about this earlier, where everyone's rowing in the same direction, that's where improvement's going to happen. And I do think if there's a signal from the state board to the field that they're willing to pick up the oars and start paddling with people, not that you haven't said that before, but if it's really overt, I do think that there are people who are ready to collaborate. And hopefully you see that through the fact that I'm starving back there, but I'm still sitting here listening to the conversation. Texting a few people just to say, hey, come back here if you need me. But you know, you definitely have people who are in education for the right reasons. No one enters into education hoping that they can just roll in the parking lot at 8:30 with the kids and roll out at 3:30. It's a passion, it's a calling. And, you know, we can tap into that. And I do think inherent to that is trust and support. And, you know, just as an aside, that doesn't happen without professional learning and training. We can't change a system without professional learning and training. And one of the things that's happening at a federal level is professional learning funds are at risk. So it's going to be hard to move and evolve a system without access to learning and support. So anything that a state board can do to help, you know, throw up the signal flares and say, listen, how do we expect improvement when we're really kind of slashing a system, for lack of a better way to put it. But, you know, long story short, you have people who are ready to work and improve the system. I don't think anybody in any school is going to say that we can't improve.
Yeah, and I think that's right. But I like the idea that you guys are looking for opportunities to innovate, and I love that you're doing the conference, you know, so I think that's what we want to have bigger conversations about, is how can we stop the conveyor belt here that we've been on for too long of imposing imposing rules on you because there's a sense that you can't be trusted. I mean, that's what all these rules are. Like, all of the rules at the state level are, we can't trust them to do this without ordering them to do it.
Right,
That's the mentality.
it's draconian in nature, right?
And so, you know, when we've had conversations now, I've been on the board for 8 years. And I mean, I can tell you, I know you've sat in the back and watched some of this stuff. We've had rules where we've tried to relax some of the requirements on districts to allow some of that breathing space and innovation. And we have been told, how dare you, you can't do that because that we don't trust the local governments to do it. Like you're weakening the standards of the system. No, we're trying to give them the ability to innovate and control their own schools. And we're told, you don't care about kids. You don't wanna, you're weakening the standards. It's not about weakening standards. It's about empowering you guys to have some ability to manage yourselves, right? And that's, we'd like to have that more of a collaborative. You know,
But if you grew up in a system that in your entire career, from teacher through administrator, you've learned the entire role of administration is just ensuring compliance with this like mountain of rules, policy and legislative, then you're like, no, hold on, like, we're just gonna let loose just in this one place. It feels like, I could see how it could feel like from an administrative position, like you're loosening the standards, what the heck, not just like, because it seems like one place that it's happening, as opposed to a systemic approach of like, we are gonna collaboratively figure out how to like unburden as much as possible the bureaucracy, bureaucratic requirements to allow you to get breathing room around the education of children in the state.
Well, and here's some of the reality, you know, a systemic change to the system, which would be really exciting, will probably show a decline in standardized test scores for a little while.
Yeah.
But you can't lose patience because that change is going to take a while. And it needs to everyone to have some awareness around that to say, listen, we get it. We might be testing some of the wrong outcomes right now when we're talking about an outcome-based system. So how can we kind of change the data metric profile that we're reporting on when it comes to that?
Yeah.
So, but that's growth.
Yeah, right, and I would hope that we could do it, and like, if we go down this path, right, and work collaboratively with you guys to come up with some ways to give you some of that flexibility in that space to innovate. You know, hopefully, we're not just saying, oh, no rules, but we're saying, let's switch from prescribing so many inputs to focus on the outcomes so that we don't have those couple of years where, oh, you know, the test scores are gonna go down, like we would hopefully do the transition so that that doesn't happen. That would be the goal.
Right.
I get what you're saying.
So
Yeah,
the leading edge indicator of some of these things, if you look at some of the top schools and say, how do they take students in admission process? It is not just based on SATs and your transcripts. Okay, that form a little part of it. Okay, rest is what has this kid done in leadership, in innovation, community work, you know, just about several other things, which is, you know, if you look at just the test scores, none of them get reflected in that.
Well, yeah, that and districts don't get to choose who they're taking in.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's a comparison that's really important as well.
Yeah, so use some of the metric that
right.
universities are using for their
But that
admissions.
gets to the point that I was making earlier, this is a great point, it's like when we hear from the employers, that's a lot of what they tell us is, or we hear from districts that tell us. I talked to the employers and the employers said, yeah, we need better math and science skills, we need that. But the employers want to see leadership skills, like they want to see a lot of the soft skills that we don't really measure. And so that gets to your point about, yeah, you're right, test scores don't encompass everything. So let's have that conversation about, yeah, test scores are certainly important. I don't want to lose focus on those. But are there ways we can encourage the districts to start to focus more on soft skills? How do you measure that? You don't get to choose your students. But so how do you take kids that you live in your district and train them to be, as the Keene district, you know, SAU 29 had here, here's our portrait of a graduate. Okay, I love that portrait of a graduate, but how do you measure the progress towards that 12th grader fitting that profile? Well, you've gotta, you're gonna teach them leadership and communication skills, you gotta teach them, and then you gotta measure. So I'd love to have those conversations about
Yeah,
how we can
and-
create that.
I think some of that is connected to student information systems and how you identify scope and sequence based on the pillars that you're putting in for a portrait of a graduate.
Yeah.
So if you think about leadership, where are you embedding leadership throughout a student's experience? And you can highlight that within a student information system and actually create this really robust profile.
Yeah.
It's a conversation that I had with the folks in Alma way back when I was a young superintendent. I have gray hair, I just cut it real short. So I do think there are lots of opportunity there to be able to highlight some of those things that are happening. And again, I think, Rajesh has really nailed it a few times where, we just keep layering on top of what the expectations are. And there's, unfortunately, there's a capacity issue. There are only so many hours in a day, so many people that are willing to jump into these types of jobs kind of based on the expectations and the nuances that are incumbent upon them. So I do think that a thoughtful approach to looking at the rules and, I get it with the innovation schools and things like that, that there's a way to kind of ask for forgiveness through some of these rules. I don't know that there's a really great understanding in the field about, all right, so if we are, released from this particular standard, what does that really mean? And I think some of that is kind of just like this basis of trust.
Yeah.
So there needs to be an establishment of trust so that, again, best intentions are always, expected and understood, and that's where everyone comes from. It's an optimistic approach instead of we're going to catch you doing something wrong approach.
So in my research, the past 12 years, I used a 4-part methodology for measurement. One is learning agility. That means your understanding of STEM, your ability to go learn on your own, research abilities. So given something, can you go figure out things on your own? Not the teacher has to teach you everything. Second is social engagement, where leadership, empathy, communication, how do you work with others, all that. Third is innovation skills, problem solving, critical thinking, on given a problem, can you analyze something to understand what the real problem is, that create solutions, design technology, all those kind of things to create products and such. Then the last one is entrepreneurship attitudes, self-efficacy, the confidence, agency, and a whole bunch of things that come with that, opportunity sensing and all those. So there is a methodology for measuring these. This is what I created in my thesis, and then after that, what I'm using right now, a 4-part way of analyzing this. So the test score is one part of the learning agility. Okay, but there's a lot more out there than how do you holistic view of the kid as a graduate need to have I can share some of these things with you. And again, I'll be talking about it next week. So.
Yeah, but I like, so we have, again, this isn't the first district we know. I mean, I know a lot of districts are creating these portrait of graduate. And I really like that idea.
Yeah.
And I worry that some of our regulations might get in the way of them really taking that as far as it could go, right? And those are conversations I really should have.
And I will tell you that there are a lot of great conversations very in line with the conversation that's happened here around the state about how can we do things like this.
Yeah.
And trying to bring folks together. Caitlin and some folks from her department have been a part of those formal conversations. So I think we have a lot of exciting things that can happen. And if it happens in a supportive environment, they got a much better chance of succeeding.
Yeah.
And when I taught in high school, I taught entrepreneurship. So that was my background. Yeah.
But I mean, when you started off talking about trust, and I hear you, and I feel like the way the system's structured is that, there's been decades and decades worth of the state board piling more and more rules on districts because of a lack of trust, right? Their lack of collaboration, their lack of working together on things. And I feel like we've reached a cultural point in New Hampshire where we don't, like, that mindset feels really out of date, right? We should be working together more to create these systems that empower you guys way more than they do, rather than give you a bunch of input-based rules and say, okay, check all these boxes, so I know you're doing your job.
Yeah, and compliance is, important. But, one of the other things that Drew and I have discussed in the past is that I think it's really important that the window oftentimes that the state board sees public schools is through the Ed 200 appeal lens.
Right.
And those are all worst case scenario things. And that should not be the lens through which you view public schools.
It's not, and we've had those conversations, and that's why we asked you guys to give us the district updates every month, because that gives us, because you're right, we were seeing only these bad scenarios where you had a district fighting with a family. And they were, terrible situations, and that's not a representative look at districts, so.
No, and, when I heard the word sage on the stage, or the phrase sage on the stage today as a way to characterize what's happening, that's, back from Research for Better Teaching days in the 90s, that's not really happening. But I can see how that could be something used to characterize what people think might be happening if their scope is based on some of these kind of really hyperbolic stories that are coming out.
So a large portion of, or some portion of our rules are holdovers, and so a lot of our rules about minimum standards, are designed for that. And that's we tried to have this conversation about classroom sizes during, you and I probably had a whole big conversation with teacher union about it and everything. And our point wasn't to create a free-for-all, like a lowest common denominator. Our point was to say, let's change the mindset that you have to have this classroom, that we're gonna force you, because we don't trust you, in rule to have a maximum, this class size cap, and you have to teach in a classroom with one teacher instructing students. So we try to come up with a ratio concept so that it would encourage districts to think a little differently about it. And can you do more hands-on stuff? Can you think about instruction as different than the stage on the stage? And we just got shut down because it got too caught up in the, oh my God, you guys are weakening the standards. Like, no, we're not trying to weaken the standards. We're trying to facilitate some flexibility for you districts to think about literally outside the box of a 4-wall classroom, right?
Yeah.
And that just got shut down. And that's fine, like we have the caps and that's okay. But what was lost in that conversation was, we want to have a conversation. We want our rules to be flexible so that you guys don't feel stuck of doing all instruction with one teacher in front of 20 kids.
Right.
Like, and the teacher is just talking to the kids. We just want to help you understand that's not what we're trying to mandate.
And we had a little conversation about that, and I think the utility of class sizes when it comes to the allocation of personnel and things like that becomes something that's different than actually saying, yeah, that being the case, are we actually going to make sure that we only have 21 kids in the classroom if that's what we said? And so, I do think that there are all sorts of humanities-based approaches and team teaching that is kind of busting class size out of the window. But what class size does do is it allows for the allocation of resources and budgeting. So without any sort of standard for that, that made that part difficult, but that doesn't mean you can't unpack that any further. I lost the other part that I was gonna say. Oh, no, just the conversation that we had in the minimum standards regarding the words proficiency and mastery. Like, that was really hard.
Yeah.
And we all obviously wanted mastery to be the law of the land, but in the concept and framework of minimum standards, how do you do that?
Right. So this is why I think it's great. I mean, I'm glad we're having this conversation and we gotta move on, but just involving you guys in these conversations, because I want to avoid the mistake of us imposing something that doesn't work, right? So making sure that you guys are involved in the conversation over, trying to shift our regulatory structure and so that it empowers your supers to be more entrepreneurial and your principals to be more entrepreneurial. And that's what we want. Teachers to be entrepreneurial. Like, we want to facilitate that. But we need that back and forth. And
yeah, and I think any sort of overt kind of partnership and support would be really important. Some of the things that we run into when it comes to rules and regulations are things like the system leader from the central office has trouble in some cases, and there's context to this, so I don't want to use this as something that's happening systemically, accessing title funds for professional learning because they're not in a building.
Right.
But if you're the lead person of a system,
Yeah.
there is research that identifies that the lead person of a system needs that professional learning as much as everyone so that they can bring everyone else. But there's a hurdle in place that they can't fund that.
Right.
And that, you know, that becomes one of those other kind of systemic issues that gets in the way.
Yeah.
I also want to bring up the point, I think that you made of, like, we have play-based kindergarten. I mean, the law of play-based kindergarten, which can happen, but then we layer all this other things on top of it, that makes it really hard for teachers to do play-based kindergarten because they have a lot of other responsibilities that go on top of it. And it's a perfect thing for children to have that kind of curiosity and learning, that approach.
So, and I do think of the last thing, I think surveying the students is really important. I would offer that maybe some of the survey questions should be in student language. Because if you're asking students about engagement with adult language,
Sure.
their answers are gonna be a lot different than if you're asking them in developmentally appropriate language. So I think that might kind of skew those results a little bit.
That was part of the delay too that we've had.
Yeah.
So one of the first thing was, no, this is a non-academic survey that we're gonna do as the DOE, but then I said, well, we really need to make sure somebody's helping us.
Right.
Set the language around it.
Right.
And, you know, sometimes there's a stigma to say that I love school, but there shouldn't be.
Yeah. Well, hopefully if we can get more kids, I'd love to see someday where we have a large majority of kids saying, man, I like going to school. Like, man, I feel engaged. I get a lot out of that every day. Right? You know, there's always going to be, we require them to take all kinds of cool courses. Kids aren't going to like certain courses. I get all that, but they should enjoy learning. And to Rajesh's point, like, we have enough data to suggest that we manage to take some of that joy of learning away over time. And I think that's just whole, and I'd love this, and we've had talks about this for years, but how can we fix that? I mean, I would love to see that outcome in the long run. The kids enjoy going to school. They don't hate it. They feel like they're getting their value out of it. I mean, that would be, I think if you address that, part of the test scores will take care of themselves. I mean, if they're enthusiastic about it, they're engaged, and they're loving it.
Used two concepts synonymously, and I'm not sure they're entirely synonymous to everyone.
Right.
That they should love learning.
Yeah.
And you want them to say, man, I love school.
Yeah, well, that's I know they're not synonymous, and that's why I'm saying it's like, they should, because kids do love learning, like, they just naturally do. Humans like to learn things. So therefore, they should love school. Like, if school is structured in a way that makes them not love to learn, that's a problem.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
we
student loves to learn about engines.
Yeah.
And that's their passion. And then they take a standardized test about English.
Yeah.
And that they're not making a connection right there. Then that standardized test score is not going to show that passion.
Well, this is like, I know we've talked well over this probably at this point, like that I have a belief that you slap a like external validation system of grading onto someone's love of learning something, and I don't think that actually helps. I think that hinders the process of incentivizing the natural inclination to learn. That turns into, I'm not doing this to learn, I'm doing this to get some sort of external validation.
Or when the grades don't reveal that it's a negative, it's a detriment.
Or
Or inspiration. Suddenly, what you love isn't valid, because.
Just being judged by some adult standard.
Well, thanks, Mark. Yeah, and input there.
I appreciate the opportunity to sit here.
Yeah. All right, so I think we're pretty much wrapped up. Anybody want to add anything else? Because we've done all our business.
A motion to adjourn.
Was that a motion?
That was a motion.
Second.
Okay, I think Rajesh raised his hand, so I'm gonna give him a second.
Go for it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.